owing. So you will not have to pay interest on any amount owing from your 2020 taxes until April 30th, 2022.
Now, she says that one-year buffer will hopefully help people who are owing taxes for the first time and might not be able to afford that payback right away. According to Stats Canada, about 12% of people in Vancouver, for example, collected CERB in the calendar year 2020. City News Time, 9:01, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a cold, windy day, blowing and drifting snow, sun and cloud. The high just -6. It'll feel like -14 this afternoon. It's colder than that, though, through the morning. Mainly clear tonight, still windy, -13. Will feel like -20. For today, the high, -6.
And still feeling in the low -20s in both Ottawa and Smiths Falls, -15 degrees. City News Time, 9:01. Ontario will decide today what level of restriction to place on 3 COVID-19 hotspots that are still under very strict stay-at-home orders. The government extended the orders for Toronto, Peel and North Bay a couple of weeks ago due to high virus case numbers. Restrictions loosened in the rest of the province last month as regions moved back into the government's color-coded pandemic response framework. Now, the chief medical officer in Ontario says he is concerned about test positivity rates and more infectious variants in the regions, and that reopening might be a little cautious. With the federal budget in the offing, premiers are stepping up the pressure on the federal government to increase the annual health care transfer payments. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has acknowledged the federal share. Brunswick's Premier Blaine Higgs calls this pandemic a poor excuse to delay any funding increase. That is what the federal government is saying.
He says we should wait until the COVID-19 pandemic has ended before negotiating new funding arrangements for health care. If this is not the time to talk about health care, when?
Unanimous in demanding that the federal government hike health transfers by $28 billion this year and by 5% more each year after that. City News Time, 9:03. Pope Francis has arrived inside the heavily fortified Green Zone, the seat of Iraq's government, meeting with the president and also other officials. Crowds waving Iraqi and Vatican flags gathered along Baghdad's airport road, greeting the pontiff on his first ever papal visit to that country. Francis hopes to deliver a message of peace and hope to Iraq's Christian community, which has dwindled in recent unrest. Canadian press obtaining an email that appears to support this week's testimony by a former military ombudsman, Gary Walbourne. It was Wednesday Walbourne told a Commons Defence Committee he informed Defence Minister Harjit Sajjan 3 years ago about an allegation of misconduct against then Defence Chief General Jonathan Vance. The email shows Sajjan's Chief of Staff telling Walbourne she trusted he had spoken with the Privy Council office about allegations raised with the Defence Minister. Sajjan has said he was surprised when allegations surfaced against Vance just last month. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Friday. We made it. I have good news for you. Low UV index. Good morning. Rob Snow Show, Roger. You like that, do you? Okay. Some great morning programming ahead for you. The legendary Lowell Green will be along in just a few minutes from now. He always has a hot take on the big issues of the day. Pierre Bourque will be here from Bourque Newswatch. Look back at some of the biggest news stories of the week. Steve Warne, sports broadcaster, on a not-so-great week for the Ottawa Senators. They stunk up the place last night in Calgary. We'll do the Queen's Park Week in Review with our MPPs, focus on the vaccine rollout, the situation with long-term care. That's all ahead. And, we'll talk about smoking pot. A lot of Canadians are smoking a lot of pot. Sales of pot up 120% in the last year. Canada is actually home to some of the world's largest pot companies now. And I guess for better or worse, legal pot is a booming business. Rob Snow Show, you're in the middle of it all during the talkback hour. It's the Friday free-for-all today, so that means it's wide open on topics. We don't pick the topics. We leave the topics up to you. We'll do that between 10 and 11 this morning at 750-1310. You call me and you say, Rob, I want to talk about this, that, the other thing, and that's what we'll talk about. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. There is a lot going on in the news this morning. When it comes to spending money on health care, for example, be that acute care in the hospitals, better access to mental health care services, fixing up long-term care, the Trudeau government, you know what? It's just not interested. What is the Trudeau government interested in? Electric buses. Oh, yes, electric buses. Lots of interest in electric buses. Governing is about making priorities. And this government has picked its lane, and it's picked the bus lane. You might want to ask yourself as a Canadian voter, here in Ottawa, a lot of Liberal MPs, you might want to ask, why does the leader of your party hate spending money on healthcare so much? Healthcare is important to me. Why does the leader of the Liberal Party refuse to invest in the Canadian healthcare system? A tale of two stories yesterday, a tale of misguided priorities, in my own opinion. There were Canada's premiers, Canada's first ministers. And what do they want most of all from the federal government? They want more money for healthcare. Okay, $28 billion. They want more money for health care. And what is the answer from the Prime Minister? I'm not your banker, or something to that effect. Long walk, short pier comes to mind. At the same time, all smiles, the government, same government, is pleased to announce that it will spend $2.7 billion on electric buses. Okay? You have health care. You have electric buses. What's a priority for you? What's the bigger priority for you? What's more important for you? Now, I talked about this at some length earlier in the week. I'm not going to belabor it today. But I can tell you with a great deal of certainty one thing. Demand for health care, especially long-term care, is going to soar like we've never experienced before in this country in the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, because of the gray wave, the gray tsunami. We're getting older. This has already crashed ashore in Atlantic Canada and increasingly in Quebec. This is a certainty. There is no escaping it. It will happen. In my own opinion, you can't say the same thing about ridership on public transit with the same degree of certainty. Demand for public transit is, in fact, very much in doubt in the post-pandemic world, in the work remotely world. And yet, premiers ask for more money for health care. They get crickets in return because we have a government that is obsessed with getting us all onto the electric proletariat chariot. What would you rather have? For example, a modern long-term care system where every resident has their own room, where the elderly can age with dignity in a home with adequate levels of care, adequate staffing, or a ride on an electric bus. Choose your Canada. You may also want to comment on the news about pipelines this morning. There's a major report in the Report on Business in the Globe and Mail that says the Trudeau government is ready to fight to make sure that the Line 5 pipeline remains operational because it is vital to the energy security needs of this country. This, according to Seamus O'Regan, our natural resources minister. And don't get me wrong, I am encouraged to hear this from Minister O'Regan, since most of the time he is part of a government that is openly hostile to Canada's energy sector. This is no secret. Line 5. About 2 months to find a solution to this, or there are going to be big problems in Canada. Part of this pipeline goes through Michigan, and about 4.5 kilometers of it, 4.5 kilometers. Can you imagine? 4.5 kilometers is what we're talking about. It's underwater, under the Straits of Mackinac, and the governor of Michigan has ordered this to be shut down. I'm telling you, if that happens, there will be economic chaos in this country. Pearson Airport, no jet fuel. Half of the gasoline, the diesel, the propane for Ontario and Quebec, lost, gone, eliminated. I have had experts on this show tell me, if the government of Michigan is successful in closing this pipeline, it's not going to be a matter of the price of gas. I can't afford the price of gas. It's going to be a matter of I can't get gas at all. There is no gas. So isn't this a curious turn of events? You know, think about this if you're in the West. Keystone XL, who cares? Wave the white flag. Don't even kick up a fuss. Biden's made up his mind. It's not worth our 5, though. Completely different story, right? Well, now you're talking about Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec City. Holy cow, they vote Liberal there. And we want to call an election, and we want to win a majority government. But we can't do that if people can't buy gas in Toronto, and the planes are grounded at Pearson Airport, and they run out of avocado toast in Montreal. We will invoke a treaty from 1977 if that's open. I mean, come on. It's amazing to watch, right? If I worked in the oil sands in Fort Mac this morning, I would say, I hope those Eastern you-know-whats, I hope you freeze in the dark. The Straits of Mackinac. 4.5 kilometers. 4.5 kilometers. And yet, if it's closed, a country, imagine this, Canada, a country with the 3rd largest oil reserve in the world, will run out of gasoline in a matter of days, maybe weeks. If only someone had a plan to say, get Alberta oil across Canada, and only Canada, to the east, say all the way to Atlantic Canada. Refinery in a place called St. John, New Brunswick. If only there was ever such a plan. Maybe we should come up with a plan. We could call it Energy East. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
When it came to opening the business, because I was so young, there was a lot that I didn't know about management, financial management, management of people, all around management, I think is the word that I always come back to. I think that I always had a passion, and I knew that I wanted to create a space for people to get their hair done, but I had no idea, even having studied business management, what it really took to open a business as well as sustain a successful business. So in 2014, I was actually working with Angela Sutcliffe. She was my business coach at the time, and she was like, what's your niche? Like, what separates you from other salons? And when we started to really dig, it was the curls. It was the fact that we work with all curl types, curly, kinky, wavy, coily, which is how we identify our curl types. And then you have straight hair as well, of course. But you know, more than 70% of the world has some sort of curl pattern to their hair. And we just realized that that was not being addressed. It wasn't something we learned about in school. So that's, I went to the States and I traveled all over to kind of gain the information that I have now to be able to share with clients and as well as with other stylists. So in March, when it came, I thought it was gonna last, a week, 2 weeks, through, I think it started off at 2 weeks. And I was like, cool, I have 2 weeks to just relax, that's fine. So I was actually in a position where I was not happy, so to say, but I was a little bit happy, to be honest, just because of what I was experiencing personally. Now, when that extension started to happen, it was not a great feeling. It was very uncomfortable not knowing how I was going to support myself financially. So I'm so excited about the Academy. It's something that I started, and I launched it during the pandemic. So I've been teaching for a number of years. I've been educating for a number of years. I educated at Algonquin. I've educated at Versailles Hair Academy. And I've also educated in my own space, in this space and my old space up on Greenbank. And so it was just a continuum of what, I've been doing for these years. When we have a client in our chair, it's not just about making your hair look great. It's about how do you go home and take what we've just taught you and emulate that. So now, with a world where people want to, quote unquote, be diverse and inclusive, what does that really look like in a salon setting? And for me, it looks like being able to invite any curl type, any hair type, really, because I can take care of straight hair types just as well as, I can take care of curls. And we cater to all curl types regardless of what you look like on the outside. We got you.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Lowell Green.
Good morning, Rob. I'm glad you're bringing up this issue of Line 5. It seems to me that most Canadians have fallen asleep on this. This is a real, very, very real and dangerous threat. And most people don't seem to be concerned about it. Look, Line 5 right now pumps about 50 million barrels of oil into Ontario and Quebec every single day. It supplies Ontario and Quebec with about 45% of all of the propane materials that we use, all of the oil, all of the diesel fuel, the gas, etc., etc. About 45% of everything burned in Ontario and Quebec. It supplies 100% of the jet fuel that is used at Pearson International Airport. Now, Line 5, you're quite right, brings oil from Alberta down through parts of northern Michigan and then across the Straits of Mackinac. Then it travels down a little bit down the province of Ontario to the 3 giant refineries in Sarnia. It is from Montreal, gets 45% of its gas, oil, etc., etc. Those 3 refineries in Sarnia. Now, what the governor of Michigan is saying, and she's a real left-wing environmental wacko, and she's got a lot of environmental wackos on her side, along with, unfortunately, a lot of the indigenous communities on her side. So what she is saying is, look, that pipeline was built in 1953. It's, as you point out, it goes beneath the Straits of Mackinac. It lies on the floor of the ocean, or the lake, as it may be. And it already, that we are aware of, in at least 2 occasions, careless boaters have dropped anchors on it, hit it. Fortunately, it didn't spring a leak. But and this is what the governor of Michigan is saying, and there's some validity in what she is saying, and that's one of the scary things here. She says, look, if that line springs a leak beneath the waters of the Great Lakes, it will pollute Lakes Michigan, Lake Ontario, and Lake Huron, and probably part of Lake Superior. This will be devastating for Michigan. Therefore, if this is not changed... Yeah.
Even though nothing of the sort has happened in 68 years.
But don't forget, it's been there since 53, okay? So... Would you want to be driving a car built in 1953? At any rate.
No, but it's not like they just dropped it down there and then didn't do a thing to it in 68 years. They're upgrading it all the time, right?
But she says, look, you have until May 11th to either shut this thing off, reroute the oil, or we are going to shut it down for you. Now, whether she will be legally allowed to do this is a question. But the fact that we got Seamus O'Regan and a few of these other bumblers in the federal cabinet concerned about it indicates to me that there is a very real danger. I don't think Seamus O'Regan would be stirred out of his continual slumbers to comment on this unless there was a danger. You understand my point?
Sure.
Now what people are saying is, or some people are saying, well, listen, Line 5 supplies Michigan with a lot of its propane materials, some of its gas and oil. That's true. But if she shuts it off, she will shut it off as it enters the Strait of Mackinac. In other words, as it enters Canadian territory. Thus, there's no reason why Michigan can't continue to tap into it for oil, gas, propane, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, this is a very real threat. She says May 11, we're going to shut it off. If she does, you're absolutely right. This will be economic chaos. This will be lifestyle chaos in Ontario and Quebec. Now, there's another factor here that nobody seems to be talking about. It is this. Okay, so we can't get 45% of our oil, gas, et cetera, in Ontario and Quebec. Where are we going to have to try and get it from? United States, right?
Well, we could get it from the United States via ship or rail,
the tankers
or
from Saudi Arabia,
sure.
some.
Yeah,
but,
or Saudi Arabia, or Russia, or Azerbaijan.
Don't forget that that about 40% of all of the oil, gas, etc., is now foreign in this country anyway. About 55%, sorry, of oil, gas in Quebec, and all of it in the Maritimes is foreign. But the bulk of the foreign is the United States. So you can be one of the things that people, as I say, are forgetting is if we can't get it from Line 5 from Canada, from Alberta, we're going to have to get it from someplace, and the someplace is going to be, for the most part, the United States. So the United States stands to gain a great deal. This is all part of the Buy American program. If you think that Joe Biden is going to come to our defense when it means billions more money for the American economy, you're dreaming in Technicolor. But people just don't seem to understand. But you're making a very good point here, Rob. Nobody is really concerned. I mean, some 200,000 people in Alberta have lost their jobs, etc. We have pretty well ruined the energy industry, all of the above. And nobody gave a sweet flying fox fart, okay? Nobody cares. It's just Alberta, those redneck buggers out there, those wildcatters. Sure. They deserve not that. That's it. We've heard it all.
They're doing the devil's work anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They're doing the devil's work. Satan is at hand there. But you're right. Holy smokes. You mean to tell me that that we won't be able to buy gas in Ottawa? Oh, yeah. God. Well,
how about $5 a liter for gas in Ottawa? How do you like that?
Get it.
Right?
But now, you mentioned Energy East.
Yes.
What a lot of people, once again, don't know, there is a gas pipeline from Alberta all the way through Canada along the north shore of Lake Superior. It comes down through within about a quarter of a mile where I live right now and ends in Cornwall. This was to be used, instead of natural gas, the idea with Energy East was to take the natural gas out of it, buy natural gas from other sources, and put oil through to Cornwall, and then build a new pipeline from Cornwall through to the Irving refinery, thus supplying all of eastern Canada. That was Energy East, a wonderful idea that would have allowed all in oil.
Yeah.
Trudeau and his bobbleheads put a stop to it. As a consequence, as I say, the East essentially is all foreign. Yeah. So what would, if we had Energy East, if they shut off Line 5, it would still be fairly serious, but not nearly as serious because we would have this oil running through to Cornwall. It would require a little bit more piping probably to back it up down through
the fact is with Energy East, if anybody had done any research or reporting on it, most of the pipe for Energy East is already in the ground.
Precisely. Right. I won't get into this.
No. I mean, you and I we've been all over this story for I don't know how many years. And the original opening year was supposed to be 2018. Now, would it have opened in 2018 the way pipeline projects go in this country? Not likely, but nevertheless, they had hoped to have it open by 2018. Here we are, 2021. Yep. We are a country, we are so blessed with this abundant resource. like almost no other country in the world. Okay, third largest oil reserve in the world.
That's right.
And look at how vulnerable we are because of the environmental whims of one governor in the United States and 4.5 kilometers of underwater pipe. It's incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is key to it. No matter what happens, even if they do not shut off Line 5, somehow or other we're able to stumble through this.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is we are allowing a foreign government to be in control of our energy supplies for Eastern Canada. This is unconscionable. We need self-sufficiency. They have it in the United States.
Yep.
But to allow a foreign government, not always that friendly, certainly not that friendly to Canadian commerce, to allow a foreign government to dictate our energy security is a dereliction of duty.
Agreed.
This is almost criminal that we have allowed this to happen. And even when faced with a crisis, we will be shut off by May 11th if we don't do something. Then we're still stumbling around here. And my prediction is if they shut Line 5, we're going to we'll have a hell of a crisis, but they will have to institute part of Energy East. In other words, they'll have to take the gas out of that pipeline running through northern Ontario, and they will have to bring oil through it, down through to Cornwall, etc., at great extra expense. So in the end, probably we will have to at least institute part of Energy East. We still won't be able to bring it to the East Coast. It is astonishing that this occurs here. And it is criminal that it's allowed to continue, that we have allowed the United States of America to dictate whether we will have enough gas and oil to power our vehicles in Ontario and our jet planes from Pearson.
And it's Canadian oil. And it's Canadian oil, for crying out loud.
But as I say, the United States stands to benefit from this because very clearly this is where, if they shut off Line 5, we're going to have to get most of our oil from the United States, which we're already doing. I mean, the United States is now our number one supplier of foreign oil, for God's sake.
It is.
So it make me laugh. And everybody in this country hated Donald Trump. But what we were doing, we were pumping billions of dollars into Donald Trump or the American coffers because we had to buy their freaking oil. Why did we have to buy their freaking oil? Because the freaking environmental wackos in this country won't allow us to burn our own damned oil.
All right. Go take a nap.
It's
Calm
true.
down. All right.
It's true.
I'll talk to you next week.
What the environmentalists have done is say, you people in Eastern Canada, you can't buy Canadian oil. We won't let you.
I'm on all over this at 10 o'clock, too. So, look, great to hear from you.
Good.
We'll talk to you next
Rob,
week.
I'm so happy that you, pretty well alone, are on.
Where would they be without us?
God knows.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. News coming up. Rob Snow Show, City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 14. It feels like minus 25. In Smiths Falls, minus 12, and feels like minus 21. Here's what's making news this hour. A 22-year-old Ottawa man has been charged with sexual assault after an investigation into workplace incidents. An investigation into an East End Tim Hortons acting manager resulted in the charges laid. 22-year-old Sahil Preet Singh is also facing a charge of sexual exploitation involving someone under the age of 18. Ontario will decide today what level of restriction to place on those 3 COVID-19 hotspots that are still under the strict stay-at-home orders. The province's chief medical officer of health says he is also concerned about test positivity rates and more infectious variants in those regions, and that the reopening has to be cautious. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman says Walter Gretzky's influence on the league and the game of hockey was profound. Wayne Gretzky announced last night his father had died at the age of 82. Bettman says Walter Gretzky, quote, embodied all that is great about being a hockey parent, praising him for teaching his children hockey on his backyard rink. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Pierre Bourque is here from Bourque Newswatch. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. I sense a theme in your first hour here. First, you're talking about electric buses for all. What a wonderful joy.
Sure.
And then with Lowell just a moment ago, talking about the problems with Line 5 and how that might impact the economy here in Eastern Canada.
Well, it could be total chaos. It'd be total chaos.
It's frightening.
Yeah.
It's frightening, but maybe it's already chaos in the decision-making level of our national government here. I can't draw the parallel. The provincial governments, and I think you can trickle that down to your local hospital. They're all going to be clamoring for more money, whether that has to do with what you call the gray wave or simply the fact that a heck of a lot of people are getting sick here. A lot of people are getting sick. There have been a tremendous amount of delayed surgeries. The government of Canada just a couple of weeks ago announced that there were almost 400,000 surgeries that have been delayed because of the pandemic. At some point, those chickens are going to have to come home to roost.
Yeah, the last update from the Ontario Medical Association, I believe it was, or it may have been the Canadian Association, the Canadian Medical Association Journal. I'm open to being corrected there. Was that the surgery backlog just in Ontario will take 7 years to clear. 7 years, Pierre.
Yeah, and you know, I think any doctor will tell you that a delay in identifying a need for surgery means that the person who needs that surgery is going to be in a deeper pickle by the time they get their surgery, and that's going to be more costly, both for that individual, of course, but also for the system.
Yeah, and we have people once again, stories from time to time are in the news about people delaying appointments or putting off going to the hospital, maybe ignoring problems with their own bodies because out of fear of having to go see the doctor or having to go to the hospital. And if it's one thing we know, particularly, for example, when it comes to cancer, the earlier you detect it, the better your chances are of surviving cancer. And there are too many stories about cancers being detected far too late now.
Yeah, and all that puts an added tax on the system, the burden on public coffers.
Yeah.
And and when you listen to the provinces putting that out, because health is a provincial purview, you got to understand that they need it. They need the money. Yeah. They need to plan for it. They need to build for it. Maybe they need more beds, more hospitals. They need to have that built out, and that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, well, in the Quebec situation, it's not just about money, but it's also about control, right? They want money, and they want money no strings attached. The provinces want money, but they don't want to be told how to spend it either.
Yeah, but, it's the same population, right? The population.
Sure.
Those governments have to be accountable to their own populations, and at some point they're going to have to trickle in new medicines.
I guess what I'm saying is, when it comes to the Trudeau government, and look, listeners, I don't wake up every morning thinking, how am I going to pick on the Liberals today? And, there's Rob Snow. Man, does he hate the Liberals? Okay, I really don't wake up every morning doing that. It does come naturally, but nevertheless, I just find that the obsession with the government, the priority with the government, is all things green, it's all things climate, it's all things electric. I just feel, and it's my own opinion, I think they're missing the forest for the 2 billion trees. The number one concern really should be healthcare. Healthcare. And I think if you asked 100 people, what are you more concerned about, the state of the healthcare system or climate change? I think overwhelmingly, healthcare would be the choice.
Has to be. Look at what health has done to our economy this past 12 months. The concerns for health are all related to that, and I think it's proof positive. Deeply underlines your point there, Rob. Yeah. You don't have health, you don't have anything else. Everybody will tell you that. Look, you could win Lotto Max tonight. I don't know how much it is, $24 million. Lotto Max. Back, how good is it going to be for you if you can't get your back addressed?
Yeah. Now, let's go. Thank you again. I must say, if you go to Pierre's site this morning, Bourque.com, you'll see a link there for the News Hounds, which is a podcast. Do you do it every week, right?
We're doing it every week.
Every week, right? With my good buddy, Rick Gibbons, and your good buddy, Rick Gibbons, former publisher of the Ottawa Sun, former host of a radio show here on this radio station. And Mike Therrien used to be the editor-in-chief of the Ottawa Sun and the Toronto Sun, I believe, right?
Yes, sir.
And the big newspaper in St. John, New Brunswick, right? The Telegram. I think it's the Telegram. Maybe the Telegraph. Telegraph. Okay. And you invited me on yesterday, and we had a great time. I really enjoyed that, and it was fun to be part of that. And one of the things that we talked about is the situation with Harjit Sajjan and the Department of National Defense, and the testimony this week from the former military ombudsman, the problems with procurement, all of it. But on the, do you have the clip, David, of the ombudsman that we played yesterday? The military ombudsman? Okay, yeah. Yes? He's going to play it in a second.
Yes, I did meet with Minister Sajjan on March 1, 2018. Yes, I did directly tell him about an allegation of inappropriate sexual behavior made against the Chief of Defence Staff. Very shortly after that meeting, as I've said before, the autonomy and financial independence of my office was gutted yet again.
Right, so that was the testimony this week from the former military ombudsman, that he went to Harjit Sajjan, the Minister of National Defense, 3 years ago about these allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior by the former Chief of the Defense Staff, General Vance. 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Pierre. What do you think about that?
Well, he's unequivocal. You listen to him, he's unequivocal, and he's mad. The system is broken. They're broken at the top. It's been broken for a long while. And I think that outflows to many, many areas where DND is impacted. It has to do with its procurement. It has to do with its leadership. It has to do with its fairness, its transparency. And, God loves the people on the ground. Man, you won't find a bigger fan of the military than me. And I have no direct link to the military, but I'll tell you something. Maybe it's my background from NASCAR and having been exposed to those people. Just phenomenal people. God bless them. And thank them. And I thank you if you're listening. Thank you for your service to the country. At the top, what the heck's going on there? Have they lost sight of what their mission is? Have they lost sight of it? And what to do about the fact that your ombudsman, the person who's supposed to be independent, who's supposed to be that referee type of a person that anybody can go to talk about a problem, that person's wholly dependent on the largesse of the leader. The leader is going to say, here's your budget. We're going to reduce your budget. We're not going to actually talk with you, or we don't want to hear what you have to say. What's that all about? I mean, if I'm on the outside as I am today, you listening are on the inside of that and trying to make sense of it all, that's a real head scratcher. And you would wonder from a government since day one that has decided that its DNA includes transparency, and I think that's suspect at best, but they've been saying it since day one. Where is it in this realm?
Yeah. Yeah, there's that issue, and then there's a big story in the front page of the Globe. Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan's top staffer told a senior advisor inside the Prime Minister's office 3 years ago that the minister was troubled by information about former Chief of Defense Staff Jonathan Vance shortly after the minister met with the military watchdog, the ombudsman. And it's Elder Marquez, which was a familiar name during the SNC Lavalin scandal, top advisor to the Prime Minister. So, top people in the Prime Minister's office, they also knew about this 3 years ago.
Yep, the minister who ducked, right? And
the minister who ducked,
not just one minister.
And, that's one side of that story. Another side of that story is what they did to the ombudsman. They cut him off. They canceled 17 meetings with him, Mr. Walburn, and he called it a toxic place filled with backstabbers, and he eventually left the position. Just couldn't deal with it anymore. Toxic, such a toxic environment. I mean, it's a real mess. Plus, and then that get into any of the procurement problems, right?
Oh gosh,
you can go on.
You can go on about that. Look, we talked briefly last week about that. The $1 billion Coast Guard ship, the frigate program, and how many decades until we actually see one floating. Hopefully sooner than later, and then the whole mess with the fighter jets. But here's an idea for the opposition party, the Conservatives, that would seem to be flailing about not trying to help themselves anywhere here. Where are they? I mean, I don't quite understand it. Susan Delacourt has a story this week in the Toronto Star painting a comparison between the current administration of the Conservative Party and Michael Ignatieff's administration of the Liberals. And of course, we know that didn't turn out too well for him or for that party at that time. But why not? Here's an idea. Why not all of these ombudsmen, whether it's in the RCMP, the military, other areas of government, why can't they report directly to Parliament? Why can't they be independent, since that's the nature of the reason for existing in the first place?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. What do you think about this idea of spreading these vaccines out 4 months in between shots, Pierre?
Yeah. So I asked the question on our website, where is the science? If it's science-based evidence, science-based decision-making, where is that when you've got the Look, we believe the manufacturer when they tell us that the vaccines will work, right? They're telling us whether that's Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca.
Well, it's not so much that I believe the manufacturers, but I believe the regulators. I believe, the FDA or Health Canada.
Right, but they're using the material that's provided to them by the pharmaceutical. So, it's 1 degree of separation there, but it's still, at some point, we believe that it's going to work. So we're going to go get jabbed in the arm. Okay, we believe it's going to work. Those manufacturers are not telling us that we should stretch this out to 4 months. So where are they coming up with that decision?
They say they're relying on the real-time experiences that have happened in other countries, such as Scotland, where they have been using this when it comes to maybe not the Scotland. Maybe I may be confused. They're using real-time data, is what they say.
I think, first of all, if that's the case, that's terrific. But it sounds more like a talking point. It sounds like a convenient one. Right. Okay. But I'm going to be in line. As soon as I have the chance, I'm going to be in line to get my shot.
Scotland is where they had 500,000 people. They followed 500,000 people to see if the AstraZeneca vaccine was actually useful for people over the age of 65, and it prevented illnesses and hospitalizations, reduced hospitalizations by 94%. There we go. It's hard to keep track of in my Friday brain.
Well, what I don't like is that you get the politicians in the mix. And of course, they're balancing a lot of things: the impact on society, on business. I get all of that, right?
Sure.
The mental health, all of that, and maybe that's what at the end of the day it boils down to, those people who are elected to make those decisions. But it's just very interesting that you don't have any of the manufacturers, any of the regulatory bodies for that matter, saying, hey, suddenly, you know what, 4 months is okay.
Yeah. I meant to ask you, your mom, did she get a vaccine yet?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
She's not eligible yet.
Not eligible, okay. All right. Well, that's it for this week. Oh, I've just been told, I've been calling it the Straits of Mackinac, which is where this pipeline goes underwater. It's apparently pronounced Mackinac, like holy Mackinac, you know? And,
But look, any Seinfeld fan would know it was Mackinac. Man, the Mackinac peaches.
I didn't know that.
Kramer loved the Mackinac peaches.
You crack me up sometimes. I got to go. I'll talk to you next week, you news hound.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Pierre Bourque of Bourque Newswatch. I'll be right back. Friday Rob Snow Show on City News.
The Snowsuit Fund is in almost its 40th year. We've been helping low-income families keep children warm during our cold winters in Ottawa. Last season, we distributed over 16,000 snowsuits to families in our Ottawa area. Well, it originally started with just a handful of snowsuits being handed out, and it has now grown to 16,000 each year. All families must qualify for a snowsuit. We have a eligibility criteria that we follow, and it's based on low income. We follow the Stats Canada guidelines. If families are receiving assistance, they receive a snowsuit from us if they need one. We are no government funding. We are supported by the community. All our donations come from generous supporters in the community. People can donate directly to the Snowsuit Fund. $50 buys a brand new snowsuit for a child in need. Online, you can do through Canada Helps or directly through the Snowsuit Fund. Well, the Snowsuit Fund has really had to change its operation this season with the physical distancing. Normally, we have many families coming in at the same time. We are now by appointment only. We don't know if our numbers will increase, but we expect that they will go up this season. Unfortunately, this season we are not able to have the volunteers due to the spacing. Last season we had over 700 volunteers, but this year we have only allowing 8 volunteers, and they have to be continual volunteers on a regular basis. So we're not changing and introducing new people in the depot.
It's just a great charity to get involved in, and it's really when you come here and see what happens at the depot that it really starts to hook you when you see people walk in. I mean, it's changed a lot this year in terms of how the depot is working, but I was here in the days when families would show up and there could be anywhere from a mother and a single child to 12 family members, getting snowsuits and running back to the warehouse and getting different colors and different sizes. And the one constant that has always stuck with me is when you take a snowsuit out and you see a child's face. I mean, if you want to see some bright eyes and some wide grins, it's amazing when they leave here. Just incredibly happy.
Well, I think this year with COVID, I think it's very important that children have the opportunity to play outside and have a warm snowsuit. And thanks to the generous community, we are fortunate to provide these snowsuits to them. And I hope that once again we can count on their support.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
You may remember earlier in the week, one of the things that we talked about was the idea of the Conservative Party pitching to voters in an upcoming election a carbon tax, that Aaron O'Toole might be mulling a Conservative carbon tax. There was a story in the Toronto Star this week headlined, "Will Aaron O'Toole embrace a carbon tax? Some of his MPs are worried he will." Okay, and we talked about that. A lot of you were not in favor of a carbon tax, although some of you said, well, the devil is in the details, and I'd like to hear more. Well, with that being said, we have Mitchell Davidson on the line. He's writing about this week for Policy Options. He's Executive Director, StrategyCorp, Institute of Public Policy and Economy, former head of policy to Premier Doug Ford. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure, sir. When it comes to the carbon tax, should Erin O'Toole and the Conservative Party even consider one?
Well, they have to consider something. And I think that's kind of the thesis of the article. Of this decision is a bit of a spectrum, right? And on one hand, you've got the carbon tax as an option, which is politically the most difficult for O'Toole. He's obviously spoken quite vehemently against the carbon tax in the past, but when you think about it from how much money it would cost him, the money comes from people and goes back to people, so it's not going to be a big expense on the bottom line for government. And when it comes to reducing emissions, it's the one that achieves the best results. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, you can do other things like pay for individual projects, maybe to close a coal plant and rebuild a new power plant. But the bill racks up quite quickly, and you'd be surprised at how much you'd have to spend to get the types of emissions reductions that come with influencing consumer behavior that's done in the carbon tax. So I think the point really here is he's got to make a choice, and he's got to make a choice soon. And both of these choices have pros and cons. Okay. You write in Policy Options, the carbon tax at its core is popular not because it features a rebate, but rather it takes a clear stance against the universal enemy of climate change. What do you mean by that? Yeah, the point is that in the past, the Conservative Party, of which I'm supporter and member, has done a really good job of putting out pro-environmental things like support for wildlife, growing parks and conservation, that sort of thing. But they haven't really staked their ground in fighting climate change, actual policies that would reduce emissions, things that actually would reduce the amount of CO2 that we put up into the air. Okay. So the Conservative Party has this history of being decent on the environment, but it's not really that good on climate change. And so the key here for O'Toole is that, as we saw with Andrew Scheer, having a large environmental platform. I mean, he had something like 60 or 70 pages of environmental policy, and Trudeau had 7. But people liked Trudeau's better, and they certainly don't remember what was in Scheer's. And I would argue that's just because he never actually took on the climate change part of that equation, only the environment side.
Okay, let's talk about the way the Trudeau government has currently structured its price on pollution. Let's not call it a carbon tax. Let's call it a price on pollution. Their use of the language is very clever, but they have an annual rebate scheme using the tax system. Is that something that Erin O'Toole could tinker with, do you think, if he goes down this road?
Yeah, so if he were to go down the more traditional carbon tax road, I think there's 2 things that he could really do with that program. The first is deliver the rebates back in the form of actual tax cuts. So instead of giving, $100 or whatever the number is to individual families and households, lower the overall tax burden that Canadians are paying, right? You can cut business taxes, you could cut individual income taxes, and that's more fair and properly distributed, because then everybody who's earning an income is going to benefit, rather than sort of picking and choosing which types of households get more. The second thing you can do is you can actually bolster sort of the rebate that's given to rural and northern households. There's a really tax, which is that if I live in let's say rural Ontario, I've got to drive to work. I've got to drive to the grocery store. There's no bus that's going to come pick me up. There's no subway that I can hop on. So I still have to fill up at the pump. And so obviously over time, maybe electric vehicles or fuel technology gets better, and so on and so on. So giving some more money back to people who live and work in rural Ontario, rural Canada, and northern Canada is a nice way to A, reward his sort of political constituency, but B, accommodate for that legitimate grievance that, like, I don't have much other alternatives compared to people who live in cities.
Right. How many electric buses are going to Timmins, Mitchell, right?
Yeah, fair point.
Exactly. And if there's going to be some kind of rebate scheme, make it quarterly. Not annual.
That's the other thing, right? Is you're playing a bit of a guessing game. So they give out the rebate, then they collect the tax, and then every year they're surprised that they collected more tax than they gave out in rebate. So they have to scramble to fix it. And every time that happens, people get upset because one of the things when it comes to taking money out of my pocket with government is I don't inherently trust them that they're going to do it properly and they're going to give it all back to me like they said. And each year they pose that question to themselves again, are you going to fix this? So if you did it quarterly, you would just be much more accurate in the amount of money you're giving back compared to the amount of money that you're taking.
Okay. You used to work with Doug Ford. Okay. Doug Ford ran against a carbon tax.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Scott Moe's no fan of a carbon tax. Jason Kenney doesn't want a carbon tax. The resistance. How do you deal with these provincial premiers who want nothing to do with a carbon tax?
Yeah, and that's where, the Aaron O'Toole finds himself in a harder spot, because these are obviously not just key provinces for him, but these are key individual people, right? Having these people on board, these premiers on board is a big part of his future electoral success. So what I talk about in the article is, if the carbon tax the federally imposed carbon tax were removed today, 7 out of 10 provinces would still have a carbon tax within their own jurisdictions right now. So you're really only talking about Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. And so if Aaron O'Toole were to repeal the carbon tax, it would still be in existence in 7 of 10 provinces. And for those other 3, you could create individual provincial plans to help them meet their targets. The issue there, again, you're going to have to spend more money. You're going to have to, grow the size of government to do those things. So it's a bit contradictory to how conservatives would traditionally think, but it recognizes that provincial autonomy that O'Toole's recognized in the past. So I think the whole point is at some point he's going to have to make a decision, and I don't think he's going to like the decision that he has to make, but that's part of being, the leader of the opposition and potentially the prime minister of the country is you're going to have to make some tough choices. And so he's got one in his future coming up, that's for sure.
Mitchell Davidson, thank you for your time this morning.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
Executive Director, StrategyCorp Institute of Public Policy and the Economy, former head of policy for Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Friday, free-for-all talkback hour comes up right after the news on City News.
is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, March 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, feeling into the minus 20s in this wind. In Ottawa, it's minus 14 degrees. It's minus 12 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We have breaking news, and it could soon be official that Canada is getting its 4th COVID-19 vaccine.
The single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine will be getting approval from Health Canada today. The official word not out yet, but health officials are due to hold a technical briefing, and Prime Minister is set to speak in a couple of hours, along with a team of ministers and the Chief Public Health Officer. This shot could greatly change Canada's vaccination efforts. It is a single-dose vaccine instead of 2 doses like our currently approved vaccines. So the one and done will help get more people fully vaccinated much more quickly. Canada has pre-ordered about 10 million shots from Johnson & Johnson with the option to buy millions more. While the efficacy is a bit lower than the Pfizer, Moderna and AstraZeneca shots, experts say it still provides a large amount of protection against the virus. Yesterday, Health Canada officials noted a decision would be coming in days. Delivery dates and details still being worked out with the company.
News time 10:01. We're expecting provincial COVID case numbers for the day shortly. Ontario is going to decide today what level of restriction to place on those 3 COVID-19 hotspots that are still under the strict stay-at-home orders. The government extended those orders for Toronto, Peel, and North Bay just 2 weeks ago due to high virus case numbers. And now your forecast. Here's meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a cold, windy day, blowing and drifting snow, sun and cloud. The high just minus 6. It'll feel like minus 14 this afternoon. It's colder than that, though, through the morning. Mainly clear tonight, still windy. Minus 13 will feel like minus 20. For today, the high, minus 6.
And right now, feeling in the low minus 20s, it's minus 14 degrees in Ottawa. It's minus 12 in Smiths Falls. Provincial government making an announcement about skilled trades this morning. We get more from City News reporter Richard Southern.
Well, looking to boost the sagging labor sector, Labor Minister Monty McNaughton says that the government is basically going to pay some employers in the skilled trades area to take on apprentices and to shepherd them through their organization.
Our government is investing $23 million to provide a new incentive for employers to help them get their apprentices through their training journeys and into well-paying careers. Through the achievement incentive, employers will receive bonuses at key milestones in their apprentices' journeys, like completing their in-class training levels or certificates of qualification.
The Labour Minister calling it mission critical that Ontario fill lots of vacancies in the skilled trades.
03, a 22-year-old Ottawa man charged with sexual assault after an investigation into workplace incidents. An investigation into an East End Tim Hortons and the acting manager resulted in the charges laid. 22-year-old Sahil Preet Singh is also facing a charge of sexual exploitation. In July and August of last year, it involved someone under the age of 18. Investigators also believe there could be other victims. Anyone with information is asked to contact Ottawa Police. Former CFL and NFL offensive lineman Chris Schultz has died after suffering a heart attack. The Burlington native was 61 years old. He played with the Cowboys from 83 to 86 before returning home to play with Toronto. Schultz was twice a CFL All-Star. After retirement, he was an analyst on CFL coverage on TSN. Chris Schultz dead at the age of 61. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Last chance to have at me and David for the week. There will be a news conference this hour. We'll listen to a few minutes of it when it begins with Health Canada approving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It's 1 dose required, easier storage requirements. So it's good news. It's good news. But this is the Friday Free-for-All Talkback Hour. It's very much your hour. It's our favorite hour of the week around here because you pick the topics. We don't pick the topics. And we have topics. But if they're not your topics, we are ready, willing, and able to roll with your topics. Okay, it's been a busy week in the news game. There have been lots of developments on some big stories. Everything with problems with the Canadian military, more issues with our light rail rollout. Queen's Park is always hopping, always news out of Ford Nation. And, of course, the pandemic. There's the vaccine rollout. There's the ever-present threat of more closures and lockdowns. Dr. Vera Etches told the local media today the third wave is here. So whatever strikes your fancy this morning, let's get it going. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. That is our call-in line. Line 1 is Mark in Ottawa. Good morning, Mark.
Good day, Mr. Snow.
Yes, sir. Just call me Rob, please.
Okay, Rob.
Yes.
This pandemic vaccine stuff is driving me crazy.
What in particular is driving you crazy, sir?
Number one, he was so late getting to the game, and we could have been producing like Britain has, startup factories. Okay, that's number one.
Right.
Number two, now we're grifting off of third world countries there that we're supposed to be giving vaccines to so that he can increase his volume to Canadians.
Yeah, the COVAX.
Number three, taking this vaccine from India, my goodness, vaccines because they got a shelf life on them?
I'm not sure if they have a shelf life on. I'm sure they must have a shelf life on them, but I haven't heard that that's an issue.
28 days. But if they're not fit for India, I don't know what's going on.
Well, maybe this is vaccine diplomacy, sir. I don't think, given the supply issues that we have, and this vaccine from India, the Covishield, is basically the same as the AstraZeneca vaccine. I don't think we should be turning away any vaccine if a country wants to give Canada some vaccine.
Okay, my fourth point is,
all right.
How are we the only ones that are extending by 4 months in between doses? I don't understand. We're taking the news from the government as opposed to the manufacturers?
Well, look, I've interviewed a lot of experts on this week, sir. Okay. Should we be waiting 4 months? And they have all told me they're confident that there's not going to be much of an issue waiting 4 months, and it's probably not a bad idea to get as many doses into as many bodies as possible right now to give the most people as much protection as possible. I know you're not comfortable with it. When I first heard it, I wasn't comfortable with it either. 21 to 28 days was the manufacturer's recommendation, right?
Certainly.
And now it's going to be 112 days.
Yeah,
right? I think it has everything to do with supply and the desire to accelerate protection among as many people as possible, right?
Of course, but I'm willing to wait as long as it's safe. I'm willing to wait. That's the way it is. I've been locked in for a year.
Sure.
What the heck?
Sure. Okay, Mark. Thank you. All good points, sir. We don't agree on everything. Just a few seconds of the
this pathway
Health Canada approving the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
Development process. Although this process was completed in a shorter time frame, Health Canada's rigorous review standards were upheld. Detailed information on Health Canada's review of this vaccine and all COVID-19 vaccines is available on the COVID-19 Vaccines and Treatment portal at covid-vaccine.canada.ca. As for the efficacy of the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine, in clinical trials, it was shown to be 66% effective overall in preventing moderate to severe COVID-19. This exceeds the efficacy standards issued by Health Canada, the World Health Organization, and other major regulators such as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So what does this level of protection actually mean? Looking at the results of a trial of over 40,000 people, in which half of the people received the vaccine and half did not receive the vaccine. In that study, a total of 464 people developed moderate to severe illness. Of those who developed COVID-19, 348 had received the placebo or no vaccine, while 116 had received the vaccine. Sadly, there were 5 deaths due to COVID-19 in the study. All of those were in the group that did not receive the vaccine. The Janssen trials showed that the vaccine provided consistent protection across all race and age groups, including adults over 60 years of age. Studies assessed the efficacy of the vaccine against the South African and the Brazilian variants, as well as the predominant strain circulating in the United States, which is also currently the predominant strain in Canada. While some minor differences were identified, the Janssen vaccine provided acceptable levels of efficacy in all regions against all variants tested. Health Canada is working with all manufacturers of authorized COVID-19 vaccines, as well as the manufacturers of the vaccines under review to assess the efficacy.
Thank you. So J&J vaccine approved. It's 1 dose, and you can store it in the fridge for up to 3 months. That's the news there. David in the West End. David, good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I have a sad story. Rob, did you know the Kerwin family?
I don't know the Kerwin family.
You don't know the Kerwin family, okay. Percy Kerwin was a realtor in Ottawa with 5 boys. Gail Kerwin was the welterweight champ of Canada.
Oh, wow, okay.
Do you remember the Gillette Cavalcade of Sports Friday night fights?
No. I think before my time, sir. I'm not even 50 years old yet, so...
Okay, well, Friday night used to come out in New York. It was called the Gillette Friday Night Cavalcade of Sports.
Cavalcade of Sports.
Yeah,
okay.
Gail had 3 New York fights.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
But that's not my story, okay? That's the background for... California has been there for a long time now. Got the virus and got over it. She's got it again.
Oh, she got it again.
She's got it again, and she's in hospital in an induced coma.
Oh, terrible.
They're trying to keep her alive. She's in her 80s.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
but they're trying to keep her alive. But imagine she got it again, and she was in a nursing home.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Terrible news.
Yes. Yeah.
And you knew this family pretty well, I guess.
Well, Don Kerwin is my brother-in-law.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, he was quite a hockey player too, around the village.
Right.
You know, so they were a wonderful family, the whole gang. And
sure. Okay.
Gary Kerwin is still doing real estate here in Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, they're a great bunch of young men that.
Well, obviously, we wish that family well.
Yes, for sure.
Yep.
And can I do one last? Where's the anger for Biden?
Well, entirely predictable. When he's going to talk a great game on the environment, re-engaging the Paris Climate Accord, all of this other stuff. But he's not going to do anything that's really going to threaten the American energy industry. And he made it clear he was going to cancel Keystone XL as well. So
he made it clear after the election, not before.
Well, no. That's always been part of his policy. He was going to cancel Keystone.
Rob, I don't know. He said it.
I guess the point is, David. I guess my point is, here we are. We should be an energy superpower in this country. Okay, we have the 3rd largest oil reserve in the world, we are beholden to the state of Michigan and 4.5 kilometers of pipeline that could be closed in 2 months. That could lead to a big amount of economic.
Yeah,
that's my whole point.
I know, and it's a great point.
Yep.
It's a great point, but during the election, Biden said it just off the cuff, and then when he was asked about it, he said, "No, I didn't mean that," and then he went and did it anyway.
David, I gotta go. David, thank you.
You know what, Rob?
What's that?
He can't listen to your program.
What do you mean you can't listen to my program?
Because he's still in bed.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. I missed that. Wow, 1,250 cases today. So an uptick in cases. 337 in Toronto, 167 in Peel, York 129. And no Ottawa number just yet. Okay. As of 8 o'clock yesterday, In total, 820,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine have been administered in Ontario. That is right from the Ontario government just moments ago. Mike. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
I only wanted to touch on 2 points.
Sure.
Well, 3. I'm in day 20 of quarantine at Civic, which I caught. Well, I don't have COVID, but the symptoms are that I should be isolated for going into 20 days. But what I wanted to say was we have equalization payments for the provinces. We should do a reverse equalization when it comes to gas. If Line 5 is going to Canada, then send some of that to Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and be fair, put it into a pot and split it up and be fair.
Okay.
That's my first point. And my second point was we've heard from 2 top bureaucrats, the Prime Minister and Governor General, that people experience things different ways. I'm wondering how long before Haju says the same thing in advance.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. She experienced it differently. People experience things differently, that line.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right, Mike, thank you. Thank you for your call. Lines available there, folks, 750-1310. Friday, free for all. Rob Snow Show Talk Back Hour. This is City News.
Here at the Thirsty Maiden, we offer a variety of products. So everything from breakfast items, so it's breakfast sandwiches and scones, which have become a staple item here at the cafe. We have an assortment of pastries and cakes and desserts. So we're really big on our dessert bar, which a lot of people come here for. And of course, our delicious coffee beverages. So we do offer not your typical lattes, things like a chocolate banana coconut latte, cinnamon coconut, which is my favorite, and our take on even a pumpkin spice, which we add nutmeg and a dash of cayenne in just to give it a bit of a kick. When you start a business, you don't factor in all the things that could go wrong. You think anything that goes wrong, any failure, it's got to be something on your shoulders. You didn't market right, you're carrying the wrong products, you didn't price your items correctly, all the things, right? But when this pandemic began, things going through my brain were I didn't factor in a pandemic. And we were just starting to grow. We were about to blow up, and I think I spent 2 days crying. And then I shut my business down for, I think, a period of 2 or 3 days. And just being at home during that time, I realized this is not me. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a hard worker. I don't give up, and I'm a go-getter. And I started to think, well, I should probably just start clearing out my freezers and posting and seeing who wants to buy what. And that was sort of how I built my momentum back up. I realized that there's still a large number of people that wanted to support us and were looking for the items that I had to provide. So we started there. Then I reopened literally not even 3 or 4 days after I closed my doors, and then started doing curbside pickups and deliveries, started doing the deliveries myself, free deliveries to the local community, going as far as Bell's Corners and Carp as well. And that's why we're still here. This community has really kept us going a year into the pandemic. But we've had a changeover of staff a couple times now, and situations change, and when you can't offer hours and hours for your employees, you don't blame them when they have to go elsewhere. So I think that's also been one of the challenges is recruiting, training, and then they leave, and then bringing in more people and recruiting, and anybody in this industry will tell you that that's something we deal with on a regular basis, whether or not COVID's in the mix or not, but more so now because every time there's a lockdown, there's a risk of, will we make it through? And then you lay off more staff, and then again, their situations and their circumstances change.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Now, one of the big stories to me this morning is the Line 5 pipeline. And the Trudeau government, it appears, has finally awakened to the fact that this represents a grave threat to the Canadian economy. That if the governor of Michigan has her way and she can convince a court to side with her state, that pipeline could close in May. And if you thought rail blockades last year caused economic disruption in the country, it would be nothing compared to the chaos and devastation that this could bring to Canada. And look, I have done more interviews on this topic than just about any other radio show in the country, okay? I've been all over it. I mean, if you can imagine it, planes not able to take off from Pearson Airport because there's no jet fuel. Not just passenger planes, but cargo and everything, right? Imagine, half of Ontario's gasoline supply, Quebec's gasoline supply, diesel supply, half of it gone. It wouldn't be a matter of what's the price of gas or diesel. It would be a matter of can you even buy gas or diesel? You go to the gas station, there's no gas. Okay? No gas. I mean, it has crossed my mind. I know, maybe it sounds kind of evil, but it has crossed my mind that, you know what, maybe closing this pipeline for a little while wouldn't be the worst thing that ever happened, because it would serve, you know what it would do? It would serve as a giant wake-up call to all the lefty environmentalist types, the hardcore climate ideologues. It would shine a light and make them realize, you would hope, that society as we know it simply would not function without a stable supply of petrochemicals, okay? Without gasoline, without diesel, without propane, without natural gas, civil society collapses as we know it. It does. I'm sorry, it does. And maybe they would finally realize that this green fantasy land that they all think would materialize in short order, it doesn't exist, okay? Maybe someday it will. Maybe someday it will. Today is not that day. I know you shouldn't even think about it, but there you go, I said it. Anyway, Seamus O'Regan, who, let's face it, is not exactly a superstar cabinet minister, told a parliamentary committee this week that Canada is going to do whatever it takes to keep that pipeline open and the petroleum flowing. And that's good news, okay? Good for you, Seamus. Good for you. It's good to hear that kind of talk from a government that is openly hostile at times to the energy industry in this country, unless it's the energy industry in liberal Newfoundland and Labrador, where Seamus O'Regan happens to be from. Then it's vital, and hundreds of millions of dollars in aid money is distributed in the blink of an eye. As for the conservative oil in the West, well, we all know how liberals feel about Western Canadian conservative oil. It should stay in the ground, and the oil sands worker should be transitioned into some other job, or maybe just apply for EI or the CERB. Line 5. Pay attention to this story. Okay? 500,000 barrel equivalents a day of crude, natural gas, propane every single day. It's a 645-mile-long pipeline, 30 inches in diameter. Started operating in 1953. It goes into Sarnia, the petrochemical capital of Canada, into the big refineries there, where it is refined into gas, diesel, and all the other refined petroleum products, like jet fuel for Pearson Airport. And it eventually, you have Line 5 links up to Line 9, and that runs into the Quebec refineries. Yes, imagine this. In Green, Quebec, they do consume fossil fuels. There are gas stations in Montreal, okay? There are two big refineries in Quebec. Suncor refinery in Montreal, Valero refinery in Lévis. But the issue is that a small part of this pipeline, 4.5 kilometers of it, is underwater. It was built to be underwater. It was built by Bechtel Corporation, the underwater part, same company that built the Hoover Dam. And this pipeline has never had a leak in its 68-year history. The body of water, I've been calling it the Straits of Mackinac because I've been reading most of this in the print media. This is the problem, but it's apparently the Straits of Mackinac. I'm sorry. Connects Lake Michigan to Lake Huron, and the crossing for the pipeline is actually twinned at that point. It's 4.5 kilometers. And the governor of Michigan has said this is a disaster waiting to happen, and she wants it closed. She's ordered it to close sometime in May. So the clock is ticking, okay? Enbridge owns the pipeline and said it is willing to encase the entire 4.5 miles in a tunnel. Thing that's underwater into a tunnel, but even that is not enough to placate the governor. She wants nothing to do with it. And Enbridge has also said it's not going to stop operating the pipeline until a court orders it to do so. But look, we all know that the Trudeau Liberals are desperate to call an election because they believe they have the winning conditions to grab a big majority win. The last thing they need is an energy crisis. And people paying $4 or $5 a liter for gasoline, if they can get gasoline at all, planes grounded at Pearson Airport, and the entire Canadian transportation industry thrown into total chaos. They'd probably like to avoid that. So here comes Seamus O'Regan on his white horse he's riding, and he's going to save the day. But what I can never get past, the thought that kept coming back to me as I was getting ready for the program this morning. What I can't get over is why in this country where we are so blessed, okay, with this abundance, why are we in this position at all, this predicament at all? We are the 5th largest oil producing nation in the world. We are sitting on the world's 3rd largest oil reserve. Only Venezuela and Saudi Arabia have more oil in the ground than we do. We have 840,000 kilometers of pipeline infrastructure in this country, and yet with the stroke of a pen, the governor of Michigan is going to try and close 4.5 kilometers of pipeline and send the entire Canadian economy into a tailspin. How is it? I ask you, how is it that a country so rich in natural resources could be so vulnerable as this? This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, March 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 12, feeling like minus 22. In Smiths Falls, minus 10. It feels like minus 17. Here's what's making news this hour. Fourth vaccine now approved in our country. It's a single-shot Johnson & Johnson COVID fighter approved by Health Canada. That goes along with the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, and Moderna shots. Latest COVID-19 numbers show 1,250 cases in Ontario from about 64,700 tests completed. There are 63 new cases in Ottawa, 7 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 4 in Renfrew, 11 in Eastern Ontario. This coming as a decision is being made today by the province on the hotspots. There are 337 new cases in Toronto, 167 in Peel, 129 in York Region. A former acting manager at an East End Tim Hortons is facing 2 charges of sexual assault and sexual exploitation. 22-year-old Sahil Preet Singh was charged in relation to an investigation from incidents last July and August in that workplace. Police believe there could be other victims. And a warning today that many of the gadgets meant to help you keep your fingers off high-touch surfaces that are for sale on e-commerce platforms aren't really necessary and actually may pose a bigger risk. Toronto Public Health talking about these devices let you open doors, press buttons, and the like. It says if you're washing your hands and using hand sanitizer and using your arm to push buttons and open doors, that's good enough. Additional devices could also become another high-touch surface that you will just have to clean and disinfect often. City News Time, 10:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Well, that last rant of mine was therapeutic. 750-1310 Friday free for all. Canada. Ann, good morning, Ann.
Oh, hi, Rob.
Hi, Ann.
You sort of helped my rant along with Seamus and him being in charge of dealing with Line 5.
Yeah.
Such a stellar track record there. Was he not Veterans Affairs?
He was Veterans Affairs Minister.
And was he not Indigenous Affairs?
Indigenous Affairs, yes.
Yeah, so lots of confidence there.
Yeah, Bob Fife of the Globe and Mail said his name is Shameless O'Regan.
Yeah. And I also have a comment about our illustrious Prime Minister's comment about he's not our bank, or the Premier's bank.
I'm not your banker, yeah.
I'm not your banker, unless you're SNC-Lavalin, Bombardier, or something in Quebec, right? Then he's your banker.
Yep, yeah.
So, anyway, that was just 2 of the many that I had to rant about.
Well, I think that's pretty good, Ann.
And you know, you were right about the Green Brigade getting, you know, they get in their Range Rovers and go to their Muskoka cottages, but yet, you know, they're all for electric this and electric that.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
A little better.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Yep. It can be group therapy, okay? Carp, Des.
Good morning. You keeping warm, Rob?
I'm okay, buddy. How are you?
I'm groundhogging it.
You're okay. All right. Okay.
Second day.
Yeah. What's on your mind today?
Pardon?
What's on your mind?
Oh, well, that interview you had this morning really got me going.
It did.
And with that gentleman and
about the carbon tax.
The carbon tax. Yeah. I know. I've been talking to the wife about it. I told him, man. I said, this is terrible. I said, what am I going to do now? I said, now this he's going to do the carbon tax, and he said he wasn't going to do it. I said, oh, and then that gentleman put it plainly right in front of me. He has to. He hasn't got a choice to do it. Now it's either that we accept the carbon tax as it's going to come,
right,
or else we accept Trudeau. And if you think you got a hole in your pocket now, you won't even have any drawers on by the time he's done with you. So But anyway.
Okay. Okay. That's a heck of a way to put it, Des. Okay.
I'm getting kind of old for to talk straight anymore.
All right. Thank you, Des. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay. According to David, where are you getting this from, David?
From the City News Ottawa newsroom.
Oh, really?
We're following.
Okay.
We're just digging into some of the numbers here.
Okay. According to City News Ottawa, the city of Ottawa has now administered the most doses of vaccine of any health unit in the province. Well done, Ottawa.
That is
Public
data.
Health.
That's data coming right from the province's COVID-19 vaccine tracker.
We have done in Ottawa 54,345 doses. The next closest unit is Peel at 51,688. I believe Peel is slightly larger in population than Ottawa. You may want to look that up on your Wikipedia machine at home. Then Simcoe, Muskoka, 45,199. Look up the population of Peel for me. I mean, Peel, it might be.
Most recent census data, 2016, 1.382
Oh, see,
million.
even bigger than Ottawa.
Bigger.
Well, it'll be a lot more than that now. If it's 2016, 5 years ago.
A disclaimer.
I mean, Mississauga and Brampton, so we're doing well. That's
There
good.
is no
Okay.
data for Toronto yet. It's possible Toronto.
Oh, I see. Okay.
This is only the data we have available to look at.
This is Blacklock's reporter today. Speaking of Seamus O'Regan, our natural resources minister, this is Blacklock's reporter this morning. I love you guys. I subscribe. You should too. Quote, Cabinet, this is about the Trudeau government. Cabinet will consider project, quote, anything really that appears feasible. Natural Resources Minister Seamus O'Regan said yesterday his remarks followed federal auditors' complaints on difficulty in tracking actual costs and benefits of green subsidies. Quote, this is Seamus O'Regan's quote to a Commons Committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations. Quote, we're willing to look at anything, really, if it seems like it's a good idea. O'Regan cited tidal energy, solar farms, and other ventures that have received millions in federal aid. I love that. Cabinet will consider subsidizing any green project. Quote, anything really. Anything. Okay. Yeah, that worked well in Ontario, didn't it? Hyder. Where have you been? You used to call me all the time, and then I didn't hear from you. I was actually wondering if you were okay.
No, I'm okay.
You're okay? Did you give me up for Lent or something? What's going on?
I got entangled in U.S. politics.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay.
Whatever happened there. So I just want to talk about Erin O'Toole.
Erin O'Toole, sure. Yeah.
And I want to talk about what's being talked in the scientific community about oncoming grand solar minimum that we're entering. The planet Earth is entering into grand solar minimum.
Okay.
Starting it's late. Well, started late 2020s and it's going to go into the 2040s.
Okay. And what does this mean?
NASA,
What is this?
It's according to NASA and NOAA. NOAA stands for National
Oceanic Atmospheric Administration.
Yeah, exactly. They absorb the sunspots.
Yeah.
They count the sunspot numbers, and they have data that goes back to 400 years.
Okay. So what's supposed to happen then?
Cycles.
Is it going to get warmer or cooler?
It's going to get cooler.
No, it can't be. Can't be. The science is settled on this. It's going to get warmer.
Yeah, but this is 400-year-old data concerning the sunspots. So the sun it goes into two cycles, 11-year cycle.
Yeah.
And there's a bigger cycle between 70 and 100 years.
No, but 99% of scientists can't be wrong, and they all tell me it's going to get warmer.
Well, it's the history. It shows different. It's just they compared it to 1645 grand solar minimum, where the temperatures dropped periodically, and They were really
okay. All right. So this. Okay. Let's not get too technical here.
Yeah.
You think you're saying that NASA and NOAA are saying it's going to get cooler?
Yeah, it's going to get
between
cooler.
2020 and 2040. Okay. What does this have to do with Aaron O'Toole?
Yeah, no. I'm mentioning this because you talk about that Line 5.
Line
from
5
Michigan to here.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying that if winters, if the climate is going to get cooler, and we are actually securing energy for just warming our houses and during
going to be deadly.
The coldest month.
Going to be deadly. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is just an extra motivation to fix this ASAP. Have a plan to make Canada self-sufficient energy needs.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
It's worth reading into.
Okay,
Rob.
I will.
You can investigate it.
I will investigate. investigate. Well, I probably won't investigate. I will tell David to investigate.
I'm on it.
He's on it. When it comes to Line 5, I guess I would ask if Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Biden really do see eye to eye and they're all chummy and they're all buddy, why can't Mr. Trudeau resolve this Line 5 issue with one phone call? Explain that to me. Why do we find ourselves even facing the possibility of this scenario? Why would Canadians stand for such a vulnerability? I mean, the obvious solution to this has been staring us in the face for years, and yet was left to wither and die thanks to hypocrites in Quebec and their ideologue allies in Ottawa, the Energy East pipeline, because we have this uniquely Canadian thing where we have this energy abundance, third largest oil reserve in the world, but 90% of the oil is in one province in Alberta, in the oil sands. These are all in eastern Canada. Sarnia, Montreal, Lévis, St. John, New Brunswick. Newfoundland will be okay. They have oil and they have a refiner. I believe the Newfoundland refinery is in Come By Chance. And that project, you know it, folks, okay? Would have been a great nation-building project, okay? Left to wither and die by this government, this liberal government that now has to fight the Americans tooth and nail to make sure the entire Canadian economy doesn't face a death rattle because it can't get Western Canadian oil to Eastern Canada through 4.5 miles of underwater pipe off the shores of Michigan. If we had had a government with some guts and some brains and some foresight and some vision, we'd never be in this position. Instead, we had a country that was held hostage by liberal politicians in Quebec like Denis Coderre. I remember him doing a dance of joy when TransCanada finally waved the white flag and said, we give up, that we're fed up with the eco-shenanigans. They went so far as to change the company's name. They took Canada out of the name. This is a trend now. Canadian energy companies don't even want to be called Canadian anymore, and now it's called TC Energy. It was going to run from Hardisty, Alberta to St. John, New Brunswick, 4,500 kilometers, but most of the pipe is already in the ground. Hardisty, south to the Alberta-Saskatchewan border, then go east through existing pipe through Moose Jaw, Regina, Brandon, Manitoba, Portage La Prairie, Winnipeg, then into northern Ontario, Kenora, Dryden, Thunder Bay, onto Hearst, Kapuskasing. All that pipe is already in the ground. Down to North Bay, Mattawa, Ottawa. It's like a Stompin' Tom song, for crying out loud. And then east of Ottawa, you would have had to build some new pipe, but along existing corridors and right-of-way into Montreal, into Lévis, eventually down into St. John. But they didn't want it in Quebec because I guess the envelopes weren't stuffed with enough cash. And now look at the state we find ourselves in, 2 months out from goodness knows what. few miles of pipe that we have no control over. We have to go begging the Americans just to have access to our own oil. People, for goodness sakes, wake up, will you? Chris in Blackburn Hamlet.
Hi, Rob.
Yes, sir.
I'm on my trusty computer here looking up Gretchen Whitmer's election platform.
Okay.
It does talk about cleaning up the drinking water, protecting the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in here about shutting down Line 5 that I can see.
Yeah.
Interesting, because she was elected in 2019, well, late 2018, I believe. Okay. So if shutting down Line 5 is a good idea because of the environment, why didn't she make that part of her election platform? Why is this just coming out now? I'm curious as to whether she waited until after the U.S. election, because I know she was not one of Donald Trump's favorite governors, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, it's been a long-standing issue. I mean, the environmental lobby is powerful everywhere, and Michigan is no exception, right? So
yeah. But I just find the timing is interesting. And that should have been part of her platform, so people would know that this is what I'm going to be doing in case you elect me. I also did some scouting on the internet here. I just realized that I'd forgotten about this. She is involved in her own nursing home scandal.
Oh.
She's subject to legal backlash for refusing to make public the data related to her state's nursing home death numbers during COVID. So it sounds like she's kind of in
that's a Cuomo type situation. That's a exactly a Cuomo type situation. Yeah, there's a major story in the New York Times. Finally, the New York Times is actually going after Cuomo for his record on nursing home deaths.
Yeah, so maybe this Line 5 thing is just a distraction to get away from the COVID death situation.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, thank you. I get. My question is why are we in this predicament? We should never face this situation at all. Rob Snow Show, back with the final quarter, Friday Free for All Talk Back Hour here on City News.
The Snowsuit Fund is in almost its 40th year. We've been helping low-income families keep children warm during our cold winters in Ottawa. Last season, we distributed over 16,000 snowsuits to families in our Ottawa area. Well, it originally started with just a handful of snowsuits being handed out, and it has now grown to 16,000 each year. All families must qualify for a snowsuit. We have a eligibility criteria that we follow, and it's based on low income. We follow the Stats Canada guidelines. If families are receiving assistance, they receive a snowsuit from us if they need one. We are no government funding. We are supported by the community. All our donations come from generous supporters in the community. People can donate directly to the Snowsuit Fund. $50 buys a brand new snowsuit for a child in need. Online, you can do through Canada Helps or directly through the Snowsuit Fund. Well, the Snowsuit Fund has really had to change its operation this season with the physical distancing. Normally, we have many families coming in at the same time. We are now by appointment only. We don't know if our numbers will increase, but we expect that they will go up this season. Unfortunately, this season we are not able. Last season we had over 700 volunteers, but this year we have only allowing 8 volunteers, and they have to be continual volunteers on a regular basis. So we're not changing and introducing new people in the depot.
It's just a great charity to get involved in, and it's really when you come here and see what happens at the depot that it really starts to hook you when you see people walk in. I mean, it's changed a lot this year in terms of how the depot is working, but I was here in the days when families would show up and there could be anywhere from a mother and a single child to 12 family members, getting different colors and different sizes. And the one constant that has always stuck with me is when you take a snowsuit out and you see a child's face. I mean, if you want to see some bright eyes and some wide grins, it's amazing. When they leave here, they're just incredibly happy.
Well, important that children have the opportunity to play outside and have a warm snowsuit. And thanks to the generous community, we are fortunate to provide these snowsuits to them. And I hope that once again we can count on their support.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
I got about 10 minutes here. Bob in Ottawa South.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, sir.
Geez, you've had a lot of hot topics today, and
well, it's a busy time with a lot of important things going on.
Yes,
so, yeah. Medical assistance in dying. Yes.
Right, I call it MAD. Medical assistance in dying.
Okay, all right.
Pre-pandemic, in 2015, it all started with the Supreme Court decision that used the charter right to life as a basis to grant assisted dying.
Yeah. Well, Section 7, it was a section, it leaned heavily on Section 7, which is not just right to life, but also liberty, right?
Yes. Yes, but also, I mean, they were criticized for the decision by some notable jurists.
Right,
but, and in doing so, the long-standing Greek principle of do no harm has been tossed out the window.
Is that what you believe? Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
In 2019, we got the Quebec Superior Court extending the right to life to suffering, not dying. And Parliament, of course, through the
the key issue in the Quebec case was that death must be foreseeable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. But and Parliament now is dealing with that with legislation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. It's amazing how even the Supreme Court has kind of done a 180 when it comes to this entire issue. I'm sure you're old enough to remember the case of Sue Rodriguez.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
When she made this appeal, the Rodriguez case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And it was ruled that she did not have a right to medical assistance in dying.
Yes.
She did. It was illegal what she did. And then all of these years later, the court itself reversed itself.
Yes. And I'm getting to where the feds are on this related to COVID-19. They provided all kinds of wage replacement and business support. Mm-hmm. But there was nothing for health care, save the sending in the troops to a couple of long-term care facilities where we knew all the deaths, the majority of the deaths, were occurring in long-term care.
Yeah.
The feds, the provinces, we can be critical of them, but the feds provided no support other than the troops.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Excellent analysis of the issues there. Where are we next? Anne in Ottawa. Good morning, Anne.
I hope you're ready to hear a rant.
Fire away.
Okay. Well, you do have the weekend to recover, so there you go.
Okay. Right.
You asked, why do we let ourselves get so bullied and controlled on the
How did we become so vulnerable? We shouldn't be in this position.
Well, the thing is, look who's running the country. We've got an idiot that's ecologically driven with this green dream that, maybe someday there'll be something that will replace our fossil fuel industry, that will heat our homes, run our vehicles, etc., as efficiently as what we have now. But, I mean, for God's sakes, wake up and smell the coffee, people. We don't have that now. But you know what? Some of these people, I thought, you said a really brilliant thing. You say a lot of brilliant things, but no, you said maybe what has to happen is we have to have a crisis, and it actually bites people on the butt, and then they realize, wait a minute, this is stupid. We do need oil. We don't have anything better.
Wait. There's no gasoline.
Yeah. I mean, this is not, you know what, I really wish there was an island that all of these people who truly believe in this ideological, what I consider
it's called Fantasy Island. It's called Fantasy Island.
Yeah, Fantasy. Go live with Tattoo and the boss on Fantasy Island, and let the rest of us get on with living our lives and enjoying them, and stop raining on my parade.
Yeah. All right, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see ads. They're doing a remake of Fantasy Island. They have done a remake of Fantasy Island. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, of all the shows you're going to do a remake of, Fantasy Island was no good the first time around. Like, why are you? What next? The Love Boat? Are we going to do like a remake of the Love Boat? Dave.
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, Dave.
The reason we're in the situation we are now is because nobody has had the guts to stand up and say enough of this nonsense. Like you said, they're ecologically driven, and you know they don't want to upset anybody when an election comes on.
Well, they don't want anybody in Quebec.
Yeah, the eco-fascists run into those meetings and overturn tables and kick up a bloody fuss. Instead of being arrested, we cater to them. And Quebec should be told, hey, listen, guys, the money generated by the oil industry in this country is what pays the equalization payments that you so generously draw from. Cut it out. Nobody has the guts to say that. And that's why we are where we are today.
Thank you, Dave. Good one. Good one. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't need to be this way. I mean, we have so much oil in this country. Not only should we be made so vulnerable through this Line 5, we should not be importing one drop of this stuff. And whatever you think of Biden, do you think he gives a moment's thought to the domestic problems of the Canadian energy industry? Look, he's a nice enough guy, okay? He's not Canada's friend. He's shown that already on Keystone, okay? I looked up some trade data numbers when it comes to the Canadian oil industry this morning. And I mean, they're the government's own numbers. They're not my numbers. They're Government of Canada numbers. You know, every month we import 20 million barrels of oil from other countries into Canada. 20 million barrels a month. That's a StatScan number. 20.4 million barrels of oil imported into this country in the most recent month that StatScan collected data, which was November of last year. And according to the Canadian Energy Regulator in its latest report, which was for the full year ended 2019, the number one exporter of crude into this country remains the United States. 75% of all imported oil in Canada comes from the United States, and then Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, Cote d'Ivoire, Russia, Azerbaijan, Nigeria, and Libya. Why are we importing oil from these countries at all? And the provinces that import the most crude oil, New Brunswick, Quebec, Newfoundland, and Labrador. And the majority of crude oil imported into the refineries in New Brunswick and Newfoundland comes by oil tanker. It makes no sense. It's never made sense. And you know what? As soon as May, the whole country is going to find out how little sense it makes when they try to fill up, but there's no gasoline to be had. One more call, and then we'll call it a day. Daniel, Orleans.
Hey, Rob, first-time caller.
Thank you, Daniel.
The topics are wide open. So I wanted to talk about municipal property taxes. We just bought a new house, and I'm wondering how it could change. So they were last assessed in 2016 when the average house in Ottawa was $350,000. Okay. They're supposed to be assessed in 2020, but it was postponed because of COVID, so they're going to do an assessment in 2021.
Right.
So by my calculation, with the average price being $652,000, that's an 85% increase in municipal taxes that we're looking at.
Crazy. That's crazy. Wow. It's probably just the beginning of similar stories like that, Daniel, and I thank you for your call, and I thank you for all your calls today on the Talkback Hour on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, March 5th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 12. It feels like minus 22. In Smiths Falls, minus 10 and feels like minus 17. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Health Canada has now approved the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for use in Canada. City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney has that story.
This is big news in Canada's vaccination efforts. Health Canada says it's given its stamp of approval to Johnson & Johnson's Janssen COVID vaccine, noting that it meets our country's stringent safety, efficacy, and quality requirements. Dr. Supriya Sharma with Health Canada says the Johnson & Johnson shot is much easier to handle and administer than the others.
The Janssen vaccine is the first single-dose COVID-19 vaccine to be authorized in Canada. The other 4 require 2 doses. It can be stored and transported at refrigerated temperatures between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius for at least 3 months, giving greater flexibility in how it can be distributed across Canada.
It now joins the shots from Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca in Canada's COVID vaccine arsenal. The Trudeau government's already secured 10 million doses. 28 million more. Health Canada says the overall efficacy rate is around 66%. However, different regions are reporting better rates, and they say the rate doesn't mean it's a weak vaccine. It still provides protection against the virus and has a strong effectiveness in staving off serious effects. We're expecting the first shipments from Johnson & Johnson in April. However, details of delivery will be released later. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News time 11:02. Latest COVID-19 numbers in Ontario show an additional 22 deaths. 1,250 new cases of COVID-19 from about 64,700 completed tests. Locally, there are 63 new cases of COVID in Ottawa, 7 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 11 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. There are 4 new cases in Renfrew, 337 new cases in Toronto, 167 new cases in Peel. City News time 11:03, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
It's a cold, windy day, blowing and drifting snow, sun and cloud. The high just -6. It'll feel like -14 this afternoon. It's colder than that, though, through the morning. Mainly clear tonight, still windy. -13 will feel like -20. For today, the high, -6.
And right now in Ottawa, -12, feeling like -22. In Smiths Falls, it's -10. It feels like -17. A 22-year-old Ottawa man is facing sex assault charges. Police say they began an investigation to an incident which is said to have occurred between July and October of last year. According to investigators, the alleged incidents involved a person under the age of 18. It took place at an East End Tim Hortons, where the accused was the acting manager at the time. Sahil Preet Singh is facing 1 count of sex assault, 1 count of sexual exploitation. Ottawa police also believe there could be more victims. If you have information, you're asked to contact police or submit a tip electronically to the ottawapolice.ca. Anonymous tips can also be submitted by calling Crime Stoppers. Eastern Ontario Regional Network Gig Project aimed at delivering ultra-fast internet to homes and businesses in 113 Eastern Ontario municipalities to meet the needs of the region for a generation. The group says the project would create almost 10,000 jobs and also increase home value by about 3%. The Eastern Ontario Regional Network has submitted a proposal to the federal government asking for $1.6 billion in order to fund this project. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
$2.6 billion. $2.6 billion worth of legal marijuana sold for all of 2020. $2.6 billion worth. Let's explore the sales of legalized marijuana and the industry itself so many years after legalization now, with former cannabis industry executive and public affairs lead at Hill+Knowlton, Will Stewart joins me this morning on the Rob Snow Show. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rob. Always excited to talk cannabis in the morning.
Well, okay, it's great. No, look, thank you so much for taking the time. Sales up 120%, and some people are going to say, well, I'm not surprised. A lot of people are staying at home. A lot of people were out of work. A lot of time on their hands, and they maybe passed it by smoking a lot of marijuana. How this increase, so 120% increase in legal sales, how much of it can be explained by the pandemic year?
Yeah, listen, I think a significant amount of it can be explained by the pandemic year for sure. The reasons that you mentioned, as well as, I think primarily more people just with more time on their hands, right? Not as much commuting time, which frees up a few more hours, a little bit more time at home, perhaps a little desire for a little escapism, et cetera. I mean, alcohol sales have gone up as well. So I think that does contribute to it a lot. I think, though, the second piece that we shouldn't overlook is simply the massive expansion in stores, primarily in Ontario over the last year. Hundreds of new stores, which means hundreds of new places for people to go and ask questions and explore their own journey with cannabis. And maybe it's for them and maybe it's not. But I think that the pandemic, coupled with more outlets, coupled with a more diversity of product, has led to some increased sales. So I think, I'm optimistic about the future of the industry again.
Okay, so I mean, this is an incredible pace of growth, 120% increase in sales in 1 year. What's a realistic sort of retail sales growth rate looking ahead to 2021 and say the next few years?
Well, it's funny, right? You talk to some of the business analysts, and they would say that Canada has underperformed the forecast from where they thought it would be at the outset of legalization. Many people saw this as a $5 to $20 billion a year industry, not sales, but the industry itself. So I think there's still a lot of room to grow, perhaps double where we are now in terms of sales. There's a lot of conversion from legacy market and legacy growers into the legal market, because of course what we're talking about here is legal sales. So there's a lot of space for this for the industry to go. And as we start to see more derivative products coming in, and products that people already know and are comfortable consuming, and by that I mean drinkable cannabis, bath bombs with cannabis in it, those type of products that people may use without cannabis.
I have never heard of those. Bath bombs with cannabis in it?
Absolutely.
Really?
And they're now a big product in the legacy market, and now made its way into the legal market from a couple of licensed producers as well. So that's what I mean. It's difficult to convince someone who's never considered cannabis before to buy some green stuff, buy something to break it up, figure out how to roll it into a piece of paper, find a lighter, light it on fire, and do something that we've always been told not to do as Canadians, which is smoke. So there's a lot of barriers of entry in that end of it. But there's very few barriers of entry for somebody who's always used a bath bomb, has consumed a beer on a hot patio or around the pool in the summer, and they might consider those type of products in the future. And that's a great entryway into their journey in cannabis exploration.
Okay. What is known about the cannabis consumer? Who is buying cannabis legally?
All kinds of people, and I think that's the part, right? There's some people who have transitioned from illegal to the legal market, and I think that those have been cannabis consumers for a long time. There are people who prefer the higher concentrated, the live resins, the shatters, the hash, that type of thing. Those people are starting to convert as more products have come on the market. But, my friends at some of the stores that I've worked with closely in the past have told me, in the summer, a lot of tennis players were coming in to say, you know what, I could use something for my joints. Do you have a topical with cannabis in it? Or, I'd like to have a little cookie or a chocolate after my tennis match with my friends. So we're seeing that as well. It really does cut across the spectrum. I mean, my own father, who never even consumes alcohol, is asking me about topical pain relief for his back. He's 80 years old, and he's interested in figuring out if this new compound would be applicable for him and provide some relief. So we really are seeing everything from health and wellness to medical to recreational and all points in between.
One of the questions that I had, and I put it to my audience repeatedly in the run-up to the legalization of marijuana, was how many people would start smoking marijuana simply because it was legal. In other words, was the prohibition stopping people from smoking marijuana because it was illegal and the possibility of a criminal sanction, for example? Or would it largely be people who smoke it already would be the most likely consumers of marijuana, legal or otherwise? Would you say there are people who never touched it before who are now willing to go into a pot store in their neighborhood and actually try it out?
Yeah, I don't think, this would be subject of considerable debate, but, my history in retailing of cannabis at a few different places would say that, it really depends, right? Younger people who are more comfortable with more in a combustible form, like smoking a joint or the like. But I do think that the older consumer, if they've never experimented or tried cannabis before, or perhaps they're coming back to it, getting them to smoke it at the outset is a large barrier to getting them. I think those individuals are more likely to start their journey with cannabis with a topical or an edible or a drinkable, and perhaps even up to, say, a vaporizer pen or something like that, something a little bit more discreet and easy to consume. For the aficionado, right, they're all about the flower and the cure of the flower, the way the flower looks, and grinding up that green stuff to put it into their delivery mechanism of choice. And I think, so the demographics play a huge role in how you come to cannabis, but I do see tons of people coming into stores every single day saying, I don't know what I'm doing here, I don't know where to go and what to do, but I'm interested in learning more about this based on what I've read. And I think that's the big opportunity for the cannabis industry going forward.
Okay. It is an industry. And we've talked a lot about the retail, the cash register side of the business. It is an industry, though, and I'd like to ask you what you think of the maturity of this as an industry, the legal marijuana industry. For example, I remember years ago, in the run-up to legalization, reading about the Colorado experience, because Colorado was very much a pioneer in legalizing marijuana, right? And they have an area, Denver, Aurora, Boulder, Colorado, Colorado Springs, and it's called the Front Range. And it's described as the Silicon Valley of cannabis. And this is where marijuana meets high tech, and they've been rating the best and brightest from universities. And companies are working, really using science and developing marijuana technologies to grow the plant at as low a cost as possible while having a high yield and a high potency as possible, kind of the most buzz for the buck, if you will. So there's that side of it. But there are also, there are primary industries like the cultivation, the wholesaling, the manufacturing, the testing. Then there are all kind of secondary businesses like warehousing. You need a place to put the stuff. There's banking, there's financing, there's laboratories, there's testing, there's legal services, engineering, HVAC. I mean, there are all these other industries. How are we doing in Canada when it comes to the cannabis industries that maybe people don't think of?
Yeah, you actually raised an excellent point, and a point that a lot of folks are focused on. Like, we can argue internally here in Canada that the cannabis industry has not lived up to expectations, that it's had a number of false starts, primarily attributable to overinflated stock prices and valuations, and a push for massive cultivation facilities, which turned out to be producing cannabis that may not be of the highest quality. And now we have a glut of it. There's too much in vaults and in storage around the country. Okay. But you're right. We do have all those ancillary industries, all of the ones you mentioned, as well as irrigation and lighting systems and waste disposal systems and tracking systems, software systems to track those plants right from their first cutting all the way up to the customer's hand. Most people don't know, but in Canada, as soon as you take that cutting, as soon as you plant that plant, that clone of the mother plant to start the new plant, that plant gets a barcode, and that barcode follows that organic material all the way into the customer's hands. That level of tracking is a huge undertaking. So there are a lot of Canadian firms that are doing well in terms of exporting that know-how, that intellectual property, those approaches, those systems around the world. As the world starts to catch up to where Canada is and cannabis legalization takes hold. One of the big markets for us in traditional trade, of course, is the United States. It's a little different with the U.S. because it's state-by-state legalization. And what that means is while Colorado may be legal, in order to have an industry in Colorado, you have to do everything in that state, grow it, process it, dry it, sell it, etc. As soon as you cross state boundaries, you violate federal law. So what that allows, that's really handcuffed the U.S. industry. And that's good because it's allowed Canada to get a little bit of a foothold. So Canadian firms, when there's federal legalization in the U.S., should be able to go down there and bring those businesses up to scale like have been done in Canada and Europe and other places around the world.
Wow. Really interesting information, Will Stewart. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
Time.
Always happy to chat.
Former cannabis industry executive, public affairs lead, Hill+Knowlton Strategies, Will Stewart. Steve Warne on the week that was for the Ottawa Senators and the passing of Walter Gretzky. That's just ahead on City News.
I started, as I said, at Lester's Barber Shop, and it was kind of, it was one of those things that it was just an opportune time for me to get into it, just because he had decided that he was going to retire after the fire, and then the opportunity presented itself that I could open my own shop. And so I went from 150 square foot space on St. Patrick's Street to a 600 square foot space just on Beechwood to now here, and I'm in a 1,400 square foot space now. And I don't know, it's been an interesting journey because, you think that you're just going to be just you or a really small space, and then all of a sudden, you've got 10 other people working for you. You're in a much bigger space, and even incorporating the boutique. Last March, when all of this started, we closed down a little bit earlier than everybody else, and I'm going to say, being honest, part of it was social pressure. We shut down before everybody else did, and I'm watching all these other salons, just be really responsible and say we don't want to be a part of the process. So we got ahead of it and closed, and then, the week later, the government's like, everybody's shutting down. And so it was a little nerve-wracking. I guess the first step of us, trying to innovate and just keep moving forward was when the salon is closed, right? It's like, what do you do? Our whole industry is based on being with people, cutting their hair, providing a service. You have to be people together to do that. You can't do that remotely at all. So one of the first things that I saw in our industry, what people were trying to do is they were selling their hair products that they had. And luckily, I've had a website that always had a web store in the back. I just never used it. So as soon as I saw that people were doing that, I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to load up all my stuff. And so that worked out really, really well. And then from there, I managed to find a place that was like a wholesale website that allowed you to have net 60 days. So you don't have to, you can order all the stuff. You don't have to prepay any of it. There's free returns, all that. So that made it really easy for me to bring in other products and start trying to sell it. And so I went from selling hair products to shave products to bath and body products to a little bit of clothing and jewelry, and now it's just morphed into this whole, like, I want to make it a whole legit boutique. And by December of last year, I decided that this is a full-fledged thing and we're going to separate it. It's its own company. So it's really finding an opportunity that's there and running with it. So it's been really fun. Our clients are loving it. Our clients that have been here for a long time, they love it.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310.
He's the host of the Steve Warne Project and the Sens Nation podcast. Steve Warne, back with us to talk about our hockey team. Remember last week, Steve? Good morning. Welcome back. Great to hear from you.
Thanks for having me.
When we dared to dream About the playoffs?
Well, yeah.
We've all come, we've crashed back to earth now, Steve. It's not really been the best of weeks for the Ottawa Senators. What do you think of their recent play?
Certainly, yeah, if you look at what happened last night in Calgary, that was a big pile of junk that you want no part of. It was a real regression to what they looked like in the first 10 games. But I think if you look at the last 10 games in general, going into that game, they had a 6-4 mark, which is a far cry from where they were at the start of the year. You and I meet, and we tend to have a conversation that's slanted into the the most recent games. So there's that classic recency bias.
Yes.
If you're playing better, over the last 10, 15 games, so that's a good thing. But certainly last night, that was bad. That was bad goaltending. That was running around in your own end, and again, looking very much like they did in the early part of the year when everybody was pulling their hair out.
Yeah, and the frustrating thing is, it can give you hope and then take it away. The moment's notice is, you start looking at the standings because the Senators, they put together a little win streak, and all of a sudden things are looking up. Team is exciting to watch for a while, and they play Montreal, a team that they're going to play a lot this crazy all-Canadian season, and they're playing Calgary. Two teams that are ahead of you, and not really all of a sudden that far ahead of you. And boy, wouldn't you love to have 2 points against both of those teams. And frustrating, Steve, that they didn't win either game, and that's kind of frustrating. So,
yeah, that's why it's always such a hard thing when you're trying to make up for lost ground. You come out of the gates, what were the Sens? 2 wins, 12 losses, and a tie, I think, or an overtime loss. That's just putting yourself so far behind the 8 ball. And we always talk about it. When a team is trying to reel in other clubs, it's not just a matter of how many points back are you, it's how many teams back are you. Because not only do you have to start playing fantastic hockey to make up, but there's a reliance as well that the teams in front of you all play poorly. So that's why it's always, you can lull yourself in to say, okay, they're only 6 points back of Montreal final playoff spot or whatever the number is. But you also have to keep an eye on the other teams as well, because chances are when you're chasing down that many teams, at least one of those clubs is going to play well down the stretch.
Yeah. Nevertheless, they're a 500 club in their last 10 games. They're 5-5-0 in their last 10 games. They've lost 2 games in a row. But nevertheless, you really are, I am anyway, I'm starting to feel really good about the future of this team. I'm really starting to see what they have in mind. And I'm excited. Batherson is playing great lately. Kachuk's been playing well all year. Stützle is, from what I read and see on the highlight shows in the morning, he's in the running to be Rookie of the Year, right? Tim Stützle. Shabbat, they've already signed him long term. I like, that's 4 or 5 players right there. I'm not worried at all, Steve, about those people.
Well, for sure. Up front, they're all set, I think. They're on their way, and they've got more on the way with Shane Pinto in North Dakota, Alex Formanton down in Belleville. So they're going to inject even more talent up front. I have no worries whatsoever about the forwards at all. Right now, the only is in goal.
Yeah.
Matt Murray right now, if you look at his nightly save percentage, each night it's either absolutely fantastic or just rotten. And what's going on in front of him, it's hard to define, is the defense playing that badly in front of him, or is the defense, skittish out there because they right now? But that's got to improve. And Matt Murray's in the midst of a 4-year contract, just starting out at $25 million total. And so if he was signed to be the answer, he hasn't been so far. So the defense will get better as well. They've got guys on the way, first rounders. So that's not going to be an issue either. So I think that I share your optimism. The only fly in my optimism ointment would be what's happening in goal.
Okay. All right. Now, Steve's co-host for the Steve Warne project, the SWP, is Jim Jerome, Jungle Jim Jerome. And for people who are familiar with Jimmy's work, he's really good friends with Wayne Gretzky. right, Steve? So
he's known the Gretzky family for more than 30 years. He's very tight with them.
Yeah. So you guys, you did a broadcast last night, right? As this was going on and the news broke about Walter, Wayne Gretzky's father, passing at the age of 82, and Jim shared some thoughts. I haven't had a chance to listen to it yet, but I will this weekend. But what was Jimmy saying about Walter Gretzky?
Well, obviously extremely emotional, and I caught him on the fly. Like you say, we decided to do the show after the Sens game last night, so we'd have a few things to say about it for the show. And so I'm waxing on eloquently about Sens, Flames, yada, yada, and then suddenly Jimmy's phone starts blowing up with, friends, the Gretzky family, letting him know about Walter's passing. And so Jimmy was really emotional. He had some great and like I say, really emotional memories about the guy we knew as Canada's hockey dad. Certainly worth a listen. And he talked about how gracious a gentleman he was, how kind he was. He's got a son who goes on to be he was just a phenom all the way up and retirement. And you think about all the obnoxious hockey dads that we've encountered over the years. I mean, if you've been around hockey, you've encountered at least one. The super involved guy, the sometimes toxic guy. But Wally always kept things in perspective. And any credit, and this is all Jimmy's words, any credit that he got was put out there because Wayne would give him the credit. And he said, Wayne said, while the rest of Canada's marveling at all these things that the Soviet Union was doing back after the 1972 Summit Series. Oh my goodness, these drills, these training, we've never seen anything like it. Wayne said, you know what? I wasn't all that impressed with it because my dad has had me doing that stuff since I was a little kid. And so he gave all the praise to his dad. And this was never a guy who ever said, I'm the guy, and ever became obnoxious about it. He was always concerned about the little kid first and the young man. And so he was just, that was basically what Jimmy focused on, what a kind person he was, the involvement in charities, and just loved the man.
All right. So look forward to listening to that, the Steve Warne Project with, of course, Steve and Jungle Jim Jerome, and the Sens Nation podcast as well. I'm kind of annoyed that there's no Saturday Sens game, Steve, I've got to say.
It's an outrage.
I did it. Who is doing this schedule? Somebody get me Gary Bettman. Okay. Talk to you next week, I hope, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep. Steve Warne, Sens Nation podcast and the Steve Warne Project. Queen's Park Week in Review comes up right after the news here on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Friday, the 5th of March. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buck, and right now in Ottawa, mostly cloudy skies, minus 11, wind chill minus 21. Smiths Falls, cloudy minus 8, wind chill minus 14. Here's what's making news this hour. Public Health Ontario reports 63 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa out of 1,250 new cases across the province. The province reporting 22 new deaths in Ontario due to novel coronavirus. Leeds Grenville Lanark Health Unit reporting 14 new cases in that jurisdiction in the past 24 hours and 49 active cases. Elsewhere locally, it's 11 new cases for Eastern Ontario and 4 for Renfrew County and District. Those figures will be updated later this afternoon. The numbers out of nearly 65,000 tests. It comes as Ottawa's top doctor acknowledges the first steps of vaccinations for seniors 80 and older. In 7 high-risk communities in the capital, Dr. Vera Etches says we cannot vaccinate our way out of this and is encouraging everyone in Ottawa to continue the measures that keep everyone safe. That includes mask wearing and physical distancing. As data shows, Ottawa is creeping closer to the threshold for red zone restrictions. Ontario is going to decide today what level of restrictions to place on the 3 COVID-19 hotspots still under strict stay-at-home orders. The government extended those orders for Toronto, Peel, and North Bay 2 weeks ago due to high virus case numbers. Restrictions loosened in the rest of the province last month as regions moved back to the color-coded pandemic response framework. The province's chief medical officer says he's concerned about test positivity rates and more infectious variants in those regions and that reopening must be cautious. I'm Sarah Buchan for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
All right, the gang's all here. It's time for Queen's Park Week in Review. 3 MPPs are on the line, including the Progressive Conservative MPP, Northumberland Peterborough South, David Piccini in Port Hope today. David, good morning.
Good morning.
John Fraser, Liberal MPP, Ottawa South. John?
Good morning, Rob.
Yes, hi, John. And the NDP MPP from Timmins, Gilles Bisson. Hello, Gilles. Nice to hear from you. And let's start with you, Gilles. This week, the case count in Ontario today, 1,250. As of 8 o'clock yesterday, 820,000 doses of the COVID vaccine have described the current state of the vaccine rollout in Ontario.
Well, it's clear that we're having problems. There's both a supply problem in regards to the federal government not providing as much as we need, but there's also a problem in Ontario when it comes to distribution. And for whatever reason, we're going to have to vaccinate. And it seems that the government has sort of been reacting sort of at the last minute to things as they find out they get more and more problems with their vaccination plan. You know, here we are today, they're going to re-announce yet again what they're going to do to fix the vaccination system, which I think indicates that we've got a problem. And I think one of the things that was wrong at the beginning is that we already had a vaccination system. It's called public health. Public health does every year rollouts of flu vaccines and various vaccines that are given to the general population of Ontario, and the system is well established. This government, it's no secret, was not a friend to public health. They tried to cut their funding at the very beginning of their mandate as a government. They tried to eliminate a number of public healths by making them super public health units, and they didn't have the confidence in the public health system, so they created a parallel system, which I think just added to the problem. And I think if we would have stayed the course, we'd probably be better off.
David, you want in there, David?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Go ahead.
I mean, first of all, there's not a second parallel system. It's utter nonsense. So, of course, we're working with our 34 public health units in the province of Ontario. And, you know, things are very different in rural Ontario as they are from the GTA. But it's important to note when we're constantly, tweaking it, Rob, I think Ontarians understand when the National Task Force changes their guidelines on second dose administration, is the NDP suggesting we roll something out 2 months ago and then don't change it? aren't nimble
That's not what
to
we're
be
suggesting,
responsive.
and you know
That
that.
is what you're suggesting, Gilles.
No,
Just
that is
let me
not what
finish
we're
now, 'cause
suggesting.
All right,
I like
one at a
to
time,
sort of-
one at a time, one
now
at a
it's
time,
my
one at a
turn.
time,
So,
one at a time.
You know, what they're suggesting is that we don't be nimble, that we don't be responsive. I will suggest to you and submit to everyone that the nimble response has led to the most second doses administered, the most number of Ontarians vaccinated. You know, we lead the nation, and we've beta tested our software. We understand that things differ from one region to the next. And, you know, in communities like mine, we're seeing community paramedicine being engaged in the vaccine rollout. That's thanks to Ford government investments to even have community paramedicine in rural Ontario, vaccine drive-throughs, etc. So, you know, we have a 3-phase vaccination implementation plan, and we make significant progress on that. And in each public health unit, they're working. And I would, again, give a shout out to the remarkable job being done by Dr. Etches and others in Ottawa. They're doing a phenomenal job. And, you know, we facilitated dialogues for public health units to share best practices. And this is a Team Ontario, Team Canada effort. And I just wish Gilles and the NDP and the opposition would get on side with that and start working as a team.
Okay. We'll let you respond to that in a moment, but let's hear from John Fraser here.
Well, first of all, David, that's not what Gilles saying. And the issue here is that it's clear that we're not ready. And I'll just go back to your response, taking more than almost 500,000 doses and more than 60 days to get to the 70,000 residents in long-term care, the people that we said that had to get to first. So supply wasn't the problem. We weren't ready, and the planning wasn't good enough. And the latest thing that's happened is the province's online portal that we knew last September we would need to do mass vaccinations wasn't ready when vaccines got here. So you've got public health units doing their own online system. Now you'll have pharmacies, you have hospitals. Toronto is not vaccinating over 80s right now because they don't have the portal. So what I'm concerned about
maybe that's Toronto's problem, John. I mean, we're doing it here in high-risk communities. So
you know what, Ottawa Public Health, but it should be even across the province as best as possible, and the government has to provide those tools for those public health units to be successful. So if they say we're going to do an online portal, and we know we needed to do that last fall, why is it not ready when vaccines are here? Why are we piloting in pharmacies in a pandemic? The vaccines are here. Why are we piloting?
They're not here, though, John.
They are here.
Stop misleading Ontario. They're not.
David.
All right, David, I'll let you respond. Let's just let John finish his thought, and then I'll let you respond, David. Go ahead.
You know, David, the AstraZeneca vaccines are arriving. They're going exclusively to pharmacies. You have about 500. Okay? And you're piloting it. So it's only in 3 communities. It's not even across the province. So, you know, the thing is look, the reason that you have a plan, and this is to Gilles' point, is you have a plan, you articulate that plan, and you're going to have to change it. That's the way things are. But you have a plan so you can pivot quickly. The government hasn't been open and transparent about what the plan is, so it doesn't give people confidence. And when you don't get the people vaccinated first who need to be vaccinated first, I think it's fair to say it wasn't the plan.
Okay. David, go ahead, David. Go ahead, David.
So what you didn't hear from John there is you didn't hear when he talked about long-term care. And I'll fully admit, over Christmas, any suggestion of slowdown and over the Christmas and New Year and Christmas Eve was wrong, and fully acknowledge that. But what John doesn't tell people, what he carefully leaves out, is that Ontario leads the nation in terms of second doses administered in long-term care. I've mentioned on the show before that in Quebec they've launched a legal court case against the government with seniors languishing. And then we see, again, that constant need to pivot when the National Task Force then provides approvals or recommendations to delay that second dose. Ontario looks at it. You then consult with the manufacturers, and you make that decision on whether you are or are not going to do that. So that as Ontario continues to set national records in terms of vaccines being administered to Canadians in arms and Ontarians. We vaccinated more second doses to LTC than anywhere in this province, in this country, and we continue this. And so, what you haven't heard from either is any tangible suggestions. They just keep saying, we're not ready, as if.
Okay, all right. Okay, still a few minutes here. Jill, go ahead, Jill.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, if the government is doing so well, then maybe you should be responding to all of the phone calls all of our constituent offices are getting when it comes to people that are completely confused as to when, if ever, they're going to get a vaccine. They think that eventually they're going to get it, but they're hearing all kinds of different things, and they're confused as to when am I getting my vaccine? When is my mother going to get her vaccine?
None of us are going to.
Let me just finish.
Canada.
I listen. Just let me finish. Wait your turn, Dave. So the first thing is just talk to seniors and other people that are concerned, and there's not as much confidence as you make it out. The other point is that my friend Mr. Piccini says, if only the NDP stop being so negative, et cetera, et cetera. We're just echoing the concerns that are being brought to us by constituents and other people across Ontario. And when there is a suggestion to do something, as we have been doing since this House has returned, unanimous consent motions to be able to do things that would help Ontarians. But you want to work with anybody, it's your way or the highway, and when you've got a system that's not working properly, is it our responsibility?
I'm not feeling the love this week. Let me ask you this. Hold on. Let me jump in here. So Rick Hillier, the head of the province's vaccine task force, is going to be there with Premier Ford in a little more than an hour from now. Okay? What would make you happy, Jill? What do you want to hear?
The system should have, right from the beginning, been set up through our existing public health structure. The government, for some reason, and I think it's because that public health is not something that Mr. Ford likes. You just look at his voting record. When he sat at City Council in Toronto, he was on a war against public health from the whole time he was there. And I think that came to Ontario when he became premier, and has led to part of the confusion.
That's not what this is about. It's about the revised timelines for vaccinations. It's about the approval of more types of vaccines. It's about the interval doses, all of this stuff, right?
I've got to respond to this. I mean, there was...
David.
All right, go ahead,
David. Come on, David.
And there's a guideline that the government put out in November with respect to PHUs and feedback. And without question, as the Premier said, look, we're the only province in Canada that has so many PHUs, and I think John's acknowledged on previous shows, we've seen the capacity in Ottawa is the same capacity in HBCR.
There's only 15 million people.
One at a time. We can't have everybody talking over everybody.
Rob,
and with respect to working together, your leader comes out there and tries to demonize frontline workers with respect to vaccines.
Not at all.
Okay, I'm not hearing much of that, David, to be honest with you.
But to the point about working together, she comes out trying to cling to anything that will stick in the media, trying to demonize the Premier, going out on vaccine wastage. The doctors then correct her.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that 1,500 doses. Don't worry. I think that's the biggest red herring of the week. All right, let's John.
David, you don't want us to be partisan. So if you don't want it to be partisan, I don't think you should be doing that here. We want to see when the general comes out. And here's what families need to see. They need to know what the exact prioritization is for people for vaccines. Adults with developmental disabilities, people with chronic conditions like cystic fibrosis, people who are more at risk. The government has not been clear about that. The science table made their recommendations 2 weeks ago. People are anxious about that. They want to know how the plan's going to roll out. They want to see a clear and transparent plan. And that's what we need to see. And we haven't seen that. I'm going to say one more thing. I'd like to know that the portal's going to happen, because here's what the head of the task force said. Well, we're working furiously. We don't actually really need it right now. I wish it was here. So I want to hear an answer that's more clear than that, because literally it was 3 different things about the portal.
Okay.
So I'll give you that answer, and I will agree with John that John is right, that families want to see what the plan is without question. There's a 3-phase plan that's been up for months. The government is being responsive relative to an AstraZeneca vaccine that we're told you cannot vaccinate, those over the age of 65. So we have to be nimble, we have to be responsive. And then the government says, okay, given that reality, given that that's fridge stable, here's the reality. And I think Ontarians understand that. And certainly those on the front lines understand that when we were promised months ago Pfizer vaccines, my hospital invests hundreds of thousands into storing that vaccine, and then overnight we're told we're not going to get that. That's when I think we needed to come together, put down our partisanship, given that those supply chain challenges. John, instead of doing that, you started pointing to other provinces, criticizing Ontario, and then we saw the mess that those other provinces got in. So don't try and claim a moral high ground here on this. But you haven't been a team player at all.
All right. Time out. Deep breaths. Happy faces. Smiles, everybody. We're back in a minute. Second half, Queen's Park, Weekend Review, Rob Snow Show, City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself. And to see our brand name, Papa Jack, and Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario, everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec, it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario, it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. Sometimes people, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
All right, it's a feisty one today. Queen's Park Weekend Review. NDP MPP Sheila Bisson, Liberal MPP John Fraser, David Piccini, as well the Progressive Conservative MPP. This from Maclean's this morning in my daily update from Maclean's. Quote, CTV News reported that Ontario has so far wasted 1,500 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, enough to fully inoculate 750 people. The province has also successfully administered more than 1 million doses and blames malfunctioning freezers and damaged vials for the waste. Alternate headline, Ontario doesn't waste 99.9% of vaccines. Biggest red herring of the week to me, that story. What do you think, Gilles? Come on. 99.9%. Surely when you're doing a vaccination program on a scale like this, you're going to expect that there's going to be a few malfunctions along the way. 1,500 doses. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's 0.9% of the doses have gone where they're supposed to go.
Well, listen, can things go wrong? Absolutely. Do things go wrong at times? Absolutely.
Sure.
The question is, any system, either private or public, tries to minimize that. And I think what we're seeing is that there's a high degree of frustration amongst Ontarians when it comes to how this whole vaccine rollout is not going, because they are looking at it and saying, when is it going to be our turn type of thing? And it's not just a supply problem, as it's made out to be. And for my colleague from the Conservative Party to say we're leading Ontario, that's not the facts. We're leading Canada. The reality is Ontario has a long ways to go.
The country has a long way to go, though, Gilles. The country has a long way to go.
I don't disagree. Every province has its own issues, but my point is, there's facts that are being bantered out there as if Ontario is leading the path when it comes to all of this stuff, and that's not the case.
But wouldn't you say a vaccination program that is...
my point. If the government really wanted to work with the public and with the opposition, both the Liberals, Greens, and myself and the other independents, they would be doing that. And instead what they've done, they've said pretty well no to everything that has come forward as far as constructive ideas, and are saying do it my way or the highway. And anytime anybody speaks out, it's somehow or other we're being disloyal.
I think if you had to move a million units of anything, whether it's cans of Coca-Cola or bottles of Budweiser beer or Pfizer vaccines, if you were able to distribute 99.9% of the supply that you have had, I think anyone would deem that to be a success. All right, John, let's go on to John Fraser here. John Fraser, go ahead.
Rob, when I look at that, I come from the grocery business, so
I know you
every
do,
day you're thinking about waste. And when I look at 1,500 doses compared to what we put out, that's kind of on the low end of what you might see. And what it says to me is that the people on the front lines are really thinking about, are doing a good job, and they're really thinking about it. And I'm glad to hear that I was concerned that, it was one incident and spread out over that, but it's at the lower end. Now, the thing that we have to watch, and I remember this from in my work, is, as vaccines increase, just like when sales would increase, lots more things can happen. Sure. We'll have lots more delivery points, or now we're going to, we might be at 3,600 pharmacies, and so it's how you manage. It's how you manage that going forward. So far, it's really good. People are very attuned to not wasting any doses. That there still is risk out there as it expands. And so we have to be really vigilant about it, just like we had to be in business. So, but what I would say about that is, I don't think it's a red herring from the point of view of people pointing to that in the sense when you look at the overall picture. It's not a red herring in the sense that we actually need to keep our eyes on that.
Sure.
The time.
Of course. But 99.9. Come on. David, go ahead, David.
Rob, I would just say, I think that on this, the three panelists here in your show can come to agreement that I think bottom line is when you have 0.1% of vaccine wasted, that means that 99.9 have gone into the arms of Ontarians. And I think everybody understands. So that frontline worker that's been at the end of a 12-hour shift that is trying to get that vaccine in the arm, might a vial perhaps be dropped? Might there be an issue with respect to a freezer that breaks down, and then you're not applying, vaccines as per the directive? So those frontline workers are the heroes. They're the reasons we're getting this done at PHUs. Our many healthcare professionals in our hospital settings and all over Ontario in the variety of vaccine settings are the reason we've had this done. And it is important to note that the government has provided directives that in the case of no-shows, And one of the reasons we have such a low number there is because the government has provided directives for last-minute cancellations, no-shows, etc., to be able to pivot and vaccinate workers and other priority groups. So that is the reality, and I think the reason this is brought up, though, let's not forget that this is something that I think Gilles was very eloquent in his remarks. I would suggest that his leader wasn't quite as understanding. She did try and use this as an attack piece against the government, but I think at the end of the day, in doing that, you're only attacking those remarkable workers on the front line, and they've done a great job in the numbers.
All agree that the frontline workers have been doing their job. That's not the issue here. And yes, people will be critical of the government at times on different parts. The bigger problem is that we don't have confidence in the way that you originally set up the vaccination system, and just bear it out by listening to your constituents. We're getting the same phone calls you are.
Yeah,
so
it's just that usually it doesn't have confidence, but our PHUs and our healthcare workers and the mayors in my community do.
Is everything that the government doing wrong? No, but they are doing some things not as well as they could, and they're not prepared to sometimes listen to others that may have different ideas.
So, Rob, just two really quick things. Look, we all agree that the people who are delivering this vaccine are very tuned into this, and that from what's happened so far, they've done an excellent job of doing it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I didn't say one thing, is you're always trying to totally eliminate. So, that's the thing that has to stay in people's heads. That's why we have to be vigilant, because that's the approach that you have to take, because once you let that slip, then it's not good. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Hey, John, let me ask you a question. I read in the news this morning the Liberal Party of Ontario has paid off its campaign debt. Yeah. So does that mean you're going to trade in the minivan, get something newer, maybe bigger, something with leather interior, or what?
Well, 100%, 100%. Well, you know what? Actually, we're gonna keep the minivan, because the minivan is the workhorse of Ontario's economy and of families, right?
Sure, it's made in Windsor, buddy. Made in Windsor, right?
Made in Windsor, you got it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get the minivan.
I'm sorry, John. I couldn't resist that. I couldn't resist.
We might go for something more than an AM/FM radio.
Okay. I've heard fabulous things about these CD players now, John.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you still have those? Ours has a cassette. But anyways.
All right. Okay.
My mixtapes.
I was still holding, crossing my fingers, John would be the leader, but
okay.
I think anytime the party works hard at reversing, I mean, all parties go into debt over campaign periods to run campaigns to sell their message to the people, and it's good that they've been working hard at addressing that.
Sure thing. Yeah.
Well, I'll point out that the Democrats were the first to pay their debt and have been doing quite well on the fundraising side.
All right. Good to hear. Good. I'm glad all three of you are doing well.
Yeah.
And